Who is muting me? Why would I be muted before I get started? But anyway, welcome to Saturday Night Revolutionary Change, or Pontificating with Pete on Revolutionary Change. Hope you guys are all doing well. And obviously, we've got a wonderful guest this evening, a gentleman that I've been wanting to speak to for a while, John Papola. He does the podcast Dad Saves America. For those of you who may be familiar with him, there are things that I agree with that he preaches. There are other things that he talks about that I don't agree with at all. And I think that there will be clearly quite a bit to uncover. But one of the topics we are going to talk about, which I thought was perfect timing, of course, was the very cordial meeting that I had at the White House the other day with this Zohran. You know, he seems like a really decent fella. Really appreciate him. Really like him very much. Well, that is great to hear, Hastik, and I'm having problems with my laptop right now. So give me 1 second. I'm on a delay shot right here. So unfortunately, our producer is not here. I'm the producer, so I have to figure this all out on my own. My tabs are working a little slow. So unfortunately, if that happens, just keep in mind, I'm not trying to delay anything. I'm trying to get things underway. So with that said, I was contemplating with Thank you, Jen. I was contemplating whether or not I would wait till Monday to do this with Jen, but I decided that we have to talk about it tonight, and obviously we'll address it more as the day unfolds. Congressman Tim Burchett, who represents Knoxville in Tennessee, is one of the few decent GOP representatives in the House. And he decided to make a public statement earlier today regarding Marjorie Taylor Greene's decision to step down from Congress. And he just said, without beating around the bush, Israel, that's the reason. There's no sugarcoating this situation. That is the reason why she's stepping away. And I would like to think that everybody who is at least somewhat up to snuff on what's going on here. And by the way, F anybody who's saying that, Marjorie Taylor Greene is getting her pension after 5 years and that's why she's stepping down. Just be thankful that somebody who's going to step down is actually not trying to stay there for their entire life, because it's one of the biggest problems we have on Capitol Hill. Marjorie Taylor Greene did insider trading, but she was also somebody who supported banning insider trading amongst congressional representatives, among other things that she did that I agreed with, and among other things that I didn't agree with. No representative is going to be exactly what you want them to be. However, Marjorie Taylor Greene is certainly somebody who conducted herself as a maverick from the day that she stepped in there. Now, of course, she was very adamant about being a pro-Trump supporter, but I believe that for the most part, what we have seen is that she was always an America First supporter, and she believed that Trump represented America First. As we know, that is not the case. Trump represents Trump. And if you flatter him just enough, you might get somewhere. And we're going to really get into it with John Papola regarding the Zohran Trump meeting at the White House yesterday. A lot of layers to that. But let's start with Marjorie's statement regarding why she decided. Thanks, S. Kolachuk. I'll be voicing my opinion about some key stories this evening, so stick around. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. So here is Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Hi, everyone. I've always represented the common American man and woman as a member of the House of Representatives, which is why I've always been despised in Washington, D.C., and just never fit in. Americans are used by the political industrial complex of both political parties, election cycle after election cycle, in order to elect whichever side can convince Americans to hate the other side more. And the results are always the same. No matter which way the political pendulum swings, Republican or Democrat, nothing ever gets better for the common American man or woman. The debt goes higher, corporate and global interests remain Washington's sweethearts, American jobs continue to be replaced, whether it's by illegal labor or legal labor by visas or just shipped overseas.
Now, I'm going to pause it here for a second because I think this is a very important topic and an issue that Jen and I tend to get into a tussle over, and that is whether or not there has to be any type of stringent rules regarding immigration. I happen to believe I'm a pretty hardliner on immigration. And the reason being is because of what it does to distort the labor pool. And this is one of the hallmarks of America First, true America First, not bigoted people who just hate anybody who's not white coming into this country and doesn't want them getting jobs. No, the fact of the matter is we have a country that does not have a system of education that is based solely on merit, that is based on advancement through different trades, different areas of study that are necessary to grow the country. And this has been what I would say is really a point of contention for a lot of people, and rightfully so. I mean, it's a point of contention for me. I think it's a huge reason why Trump was successful all three election cycles, to be honest, even though he totally won in 20. But immigration's been a huge issue. Now, Trump is no hero to labor. We all know that. But Bernie Sanders would have been if he was elected in 2016. The synergy between the Bernie and the Trump coalition in 2015, 2016 was very real, especially on immigration. Not that Bernie was anti-immigrant, but he was certainly pro-labor. And this is a huge point of contention, and one that I think without question has been the hallmark of the America First movement and will continue to be post-Trump. However, that's going to unfold. What is of tantamount importance on our part is to make sure that it doesn't become this anti-brown, anti-immigrant issue. The issue is we do not take care of our workers here in the United States. That's a fact. And so we have to recognize that that is a primary component to what we are going to do going forward. And I think Marjorie is absolutely correct on that point.
Small businesses continue to be swallowed by big corporations. Americans' hard-earned tax dollars always fund foreign wars, foreign aid, and foreign interest. And the spending power of the dollar continues to decline. The average American family can no longer survive on a single breadwinner's income, as both parents have to work in order to simply survive. And today, many in my children's generation feel hopeless for their future and don't think they will ever realize the American dream. And that breaks my heart. I ran for Congress in 2020 and have fought every single day believing that Make America Great Again meant America First. I have one of the most conservative voting records in Congress, defending the First Amendment, Second Amendment, unborn babies, because I believe God creates life at conception, and I love to fight for the little guy. Strong, safe borders, I have fought hard for that. I've fought against COVID tyrannical insanity and mandated mass vaccinations, and I've never voted to fund foreign wars with your hard-earned tax dollars. However, with almost 1 year into our majority, the legislature has been mostly sidelined. We endured an 8-week shutdown, wrongly, resulting in the House not working for the entire time, and we are entering campaign season, which means all courage leaves and only safe campaign re-election mode is turned on in the House of Representatives. During the longest shutdown in our nation's history, I raged against my own speaker and my own party for refusing to proactively work diligently to pass the plan to save Americans' health care and protect Americans from outrageous, overpriced, and unaffordable health insurance policies.
If that is the case, and I appreciate her sentiment saying that that was one of the primary drivers as to why she did what she did, but make no mistake, there is only one healthcare solution. It's the solution that works in every developed country on earth. And I'm talking developed. I'm not talking half-ass efforts. I'm talking France. I'm talking Spain. I'm talking Germany. I'm talking the UK. I'm talking Japan. I'm talking Australia. What do they all have in common? There are plenty more. All of Scandinavia. And I can go on and on. Point is, what do they all have? They have a form of a single-payer healthcare system. That's what you need. End of discussion. So anybody else who tries to come up with a rational explanation as to, well, if we did this and we did that, no. Get rid of the for-profit middlemen in between us and our doctors, and you have a solution. Why? It's pretty simple. We don't need them. They are, as you want to know who the real welfare queens are, as I once eloquently said many, many years ago, Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross, United, Luigi, they don't need to exist. Doctors can make whatever they want to make. Nurses should make a hell of a lot more than they already do. And Lord knows there's probably a lot of people out there that would like to be doctors or nurses, and they can't afford it. We do not have a tuition-free public college or trade school system in this country like they do in other parts of the world. When ish hits the fan for other countries and they need help, who do they go to? Well, they come here to some degree. They go to other places like Cuba, communist Cuba. They send out their doctors. Wonder how that's possible in a communist country, eh, Marco Rubio? But it's pretty clear that if we have a solution, it's already there. Don't have to reinvent the wheel. This is what's needed. So we'll see what happens.
The House should have been in session working every day to fix this disaster. But instead, America was force-fed disgusting political drama once again from both sides of the aisle on television every single day. My bills, which reflect many of President Trump's executive orders, like calling for a new census counting Americans only to draw new districts, making English the official language of the U.S., making it a felony to medically trans a minor, and other bills like eliminating capital gains taxes on the sale of your primary home and eliminating H-1B visas just sit. They all sit collecting dust.
Now, not everybody agrees with all of these policies, and I don't agree with every component that Marjorie is talking about. However, I do understand why this has become a big dividing line for a lot of people. But as I said, when the country gets tight and people can't afford to live, strong men and, yes, strong women will emerge, and their rhetoric is going to serve as some form of catharsis for a lot of people that are in desperate straits, and they don't want to play in these woke politics games. Because let's face it, for the most part, it's just a game. And the ones in question that are vulnerable are always used as pawns. And there's a reason why they are always constantly talked about and drawing the most amount of attention from the algorithm, because it doesn't actually deal with the economic crisis that we're living in. And so by that measure, that is why it becomes a source of controversy when those issues become at the forefront. But there is a significant portion of people in this country who agree wholeheartedly with what Margie just said. So we have to accept that we can't agree with everybody on everything. Some of it good, some of it not as good, but be it as it may, there is a reason why she has gained as much of a following and a support system, especially recently, that she has.
That's how it is for most members of Congress bills. The Speaker never brings them to the floor for a vote. Many common Americans are no longer easily convinced by paid political propaganda spokespersons and consultants on TV and paid shills on social media obediently serving with cult-like conviction to force others to swallow the political party talking points. Because they know how much credit card debt they have, they know how much their bills have gone up over the past 5 years, they actually do their own grocery shopping and know food costs too much, their rent has increasingly gone up and up, they have been outbid by corporate asset managers too many times when they put in an offer to buy a house, they have been laid off after being forced to train their visa-holding replacement. The college degree they were told to earn only left them in debt with no big six-figure salary. They see more homeless people than ever on their own community streets. They can't afford health insurance or practically any insurance, and they just aren't stupid. These are the people I represent and love because that is who all of my family and friends are, common Americans. I have been blessed to represent the 14th District of Georgia for 5 years. The district is filled with some of the most wonderful, kind-hearted, God-fearing, patriotic, hardworking people you will ever meet. Good, regular, common Americans. I
just want to say that this is a part of the country that Jen has or is going to ultimately relocate to. And when you consider the type of people that live in South Florida and the type of people that have supported Wasserman Schultz over the years, it is amazing what a breath of fresh air conservative America ends up becoming for a lot of people who don't want to live in that type of neoliberal hellscape environment. So Marjorie's right. She does live in a nice district, especially if you like, you know, Appalachia, if you will. Great nature, air is clean, just real scenic, almost like I said, out of sort of like a Norman Rockwell painting, if you will. So she's right. It is a nice district, but I still don't think she should be stepping down. Continue.
I worked hard to bring taxpayer dollars back home to help district needs. I impeached Biden's Secretary of Homeland after watching my constituents die as he facilitated dangerous open border invasion into America. And I led the effort to defund hard-left politically biased NPR and PBS and the corrupt USAID, and I did that as chair of the DOJ subcommittee. I have fought harder than almost any other elected Republican to elect Donald Trump and Republicans to power. I traveled the country for years. I spent millions of my own money. I missed precious time with my family that I can never get back. And I showed up in places like outside the New York courthouse in Collect Pond Park against a raging leftist mob as Trump faced Democrat lawfare. Meanwhile, most of the establishment Republicans who secretly hate him and who stabbed him in the back and never defended him against anything have all been welcomed in right after the election. And I will never forget the day I had to leave my mother's side as my father had brain surgery to remove cancerous tumors in order to fly to Washington, D.C. to defend President Trump and vote no against the Democrats' second impeachment in 2021. My poor father and my poor mother, it was way too much for all of us.
I told Jen a long time ago that if she was going to go forward against Wasserman Schultz, that you have to accept the fact that there are people that you think are your friends and they are going to stab you in the back and they're going to let you down and you are going to question whether this is even worth doing. Now, Marjorie was actually able to get in there and cause a ruckus, if you will. A real ruckus, actually. And she's lamenting the fact that a number of people let her down, stabbed her in the back. And I would be first to tell her, suck it up, Buttercup. You want to play in this arena? Very rarely, if ever, do you have friends, real friends. In politics, dime a dozen. And part of the reason I think Trump has locked in the way that he has is because more than anything else, he just wants undying loyalty with no questioning of his authority. Hence the comment of the despot that was brought up during the Mamdani press conference. But the truth is, very few people can actually make it in politics for the long run. There are always bumps in the road. And then there are opportunistic people who just see the grass is greener and they go for it. And that's the way things are. We saw that constantly in Trump's first term. We saw people throw him under the bus. We saw people get book deals. Part of the reason I think he had such a good time talking to Zohran is because Zohran just came straight out and told him how he felt and was very adamant about, look, I'm here to try to help New York City, your home. And I'm sure he, laid on the flattery very thick. But the point is, you just got to play to, Trump's sympathies. At the end of the day, though, Marjorie made a very conscious decision that she was going to do what was right, even if it meant losing or being ostracized. Jen made that decision when she spoke up for the Palestinian people in one of the most Zionist congressional districts in the country. I will forever be grateful that she did it, even if I knew it meant there was no way she could win. And so these are the decisions some people have to live with if they want to infect revolutionary change, as hard as it is to hear it. I do think Marjorie has an ace up her sleeve. I likely think she's going to run for a higher office like governor, possibly president. Governor seems to be the more likely move, especially since she's dropping out at the beginning of January and when she would most likely get into a primary situation with Kemp stepping away. So we'll see what happens. But like I said, I think people are jumping to way too many quick conclusions as to why she's stepping away. I do have a theory as to why, but let's finish it up.
Through it all, I never changed or went back on my campaign promises and only disagreed in a few areas, like my stance against H-1Bs replacing American jobs, AI state moratoriums, debt for life 50-year mortgage scams, standing strongly against all involvement in foreign wars, and demanding the release of the Epstein files. Other than that, my voting record has been solidly with my party and the president. Loyalty should be a two-way street, and we should be able to vote our conscience and represent our district's interests because our job title is literally representative. America first should mean America first and only Americans first, with no other foreign country ever being attached to America first in our halls of government. Standing up for American women who were raped at 14 years old, trafficked and used by rich, powerful men should not result in me being called a traitor and threatened by the President of the United States, whom I fought for. However, while yes, hurtful, my heart remains filled with joy, my life is filled with happiness, and my true convictions remain unchanged because my self-worth is not defined by a man, but instead by God who created everything in existence. You see, I have never valued power, titles, or attention in spite of all the wrong assumptions about me. I do not cling to those things because they are meaningless and empty traps that hold too many people in Washington. I believe in term limits and do not think Congress should be a lifelong career or an assisted living facility.
And that, probably more than anything else, is why people like her and respect her. She's actually putting her money where her mouth is. She did say that this was not going to be a career for her. Matt Gaetz said the same. And credit where credit's due. The only reason why there is actually a reasonable chance that Wasserman Schultz is going to be out of Congress next year is because of the redistricting that is going to happen in Florida. She's a target. And it is very likely that that'll be the end of her career. Look, let it be how it's going to happen. But the point is, as Jen often says, we're running a hospice. We're not even running a retirement home. You have people that are there. Ooh, 666, sign of the devil. If you haven't smashed that like button, please do, guys. Really appreciate you all being here on this Saturday night. But remember, let's try to get this out to as many people as possible. Jen, please check the like count. Let's put it up there. Let people know where we're at. Try to get as many people to hit that like button as possible. Really appreciate it. But I do think that there is something to be said for not making this a career. It's not supposed to be. I see it as 4 terms in the House, 2 terms in the Senate, and that's it. That's 20 years. If you need to be on Capitol Hill for longer than that, then you might as well be a crook as far as I'm concerned. And Marjorie is not clean. She's had plenty of references through, well, not APAC tracker, but the Pelosi tracker, showing that she does do trading. Now, is she as egregious as some others? Probably not. But that doesn't necessarily make or it doesn't quantify as to whether or not she's one of the worst. She's still doing what she shouldn't be doing. You know who else does insider trading through his wife? Ro Khanna. So it's nice that they want to get rid of this, but it would probably make a lot more sense if you just didn't do it altogether. We'll finish it up.
My only goal and desire has ever been to hold the Republican Party accountable for the promises it makes to the American people and put America first. And I have fought against Democrats' damaging policies like the Green New Deal, wide open, deadly, unsafe border policies, and the trans agenda on children and against women. With that has brought years of non-stop, never-ending personal attacks, death threats, lawfare, ridiculous slander and lies about me that most people could never withstand even for a single day.
That's fair.
It has been unfair and wrong, not only to me, but especially to my family, but it's been wrong to my district as well. I have too much self-respect and dignity. I love my family way too much, and I do not want my sweet district to have to endure a hurtful and hateful primary against me by the president that we all fought for, only to fight and win my election while Republicans will likely lose the midterms, and in turn be expected to defend the president against impeachment after he hatefully dumped tens of millions of dollars against me and tried to destroy me. It's all so absurd and completely unserious. I refuse to be a battered wife, hoping it all goes away and gets better. If I am cast aside by the president and the MAGA political machine and replaced by neocons, big pharma, big tech, military-industrial war complex, foreign leaders, and the elite donor class that can never ever relate to real Americans, then many common Americans have been cast aside and replaced as well. There is no plan to save the world or a 4D chess game being played. When common American people realize and understand that the political industrial complex of both parties is ripping this country apart, that not one elected leader like me is able to stop Washington's machine from gradually destroying our country, and instead the reality is that they, common Americans, the people, possess the real power over Washington, then I'll be here by their side to rebuild it. Until then, I'm going back to the people that I love, to live my life to the fullest as I always have, and I look forward to a new path ahead. I'll be resigning from office with my last day being January 5th, 2026, and I look forward to seeing many of you again sometime in the future. May God bless you all, and may God bless America.
Well, like I said, she definitely left her mark. I do think that she was probably threatened and saw it as an opportunity to just step aside. Remember, there's a reason why Charlie's assassination was done in full view of the public. They wanted to make it very clear that if you think about stepping out of line, this is what's coming. You will all be made examples of. Candace, we will get into later in the evening. But the Zionists are losing control over their narrative. Everyone knows it. Now, do I think that, again, Marjorie has plans? I do. I don't, there's no way that she's too savvy. She wouldn't just drop everything to basically go off into the sunset. She's too young. She's too feisty. She's going to do something. However, leave it to our friend, Medea Benjamin, to make a plea for her not to leave.
Hear the terrible news that Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to resign from Congress. And why do I say terrible news? Because she has been the most important anti-war voice in the Republican Congress. And she's better than over 90% of the Democrats in Congress. She has been against all war, the war in Ukraine, Israel's war in Gaza, the war now, potential war in Venezuela. She's been against them all. And why? Because she says she cares about domestic issues. She wants people to have affordable housing. She wants them to have health care, which is why she defied her party and went with the Democrats during the shutdown. Trump was furious with Marjorie Taylor Greene when she came out in favor of releasing the Epstein files. He started calling her Marjorie Traitor Greene. Her leaving sends a terrible message to all the other Republicans who might disagree with Donald Trump on an important issue and now will be too afraid to do that. Her resigning also is a win for AIPAC because she said she will not take AIPAC money. AIPAC wouldn't give her money. And she said to AIPAC, bring it on if you're going to go against me. So I say to Marjorie Taylor Greene, we need you in Congress. I disagreed with her on so many issues. Every time I would go to her office, I'd see one message out there that I hated. It would be something like, there are only two genders, male, female, trust the science. Or there'd be a map of the Gulf of Mexico saying, it's not the Gulf of Mexico, it's the Gulf of America. So many issues. But she also always had a sign on her door that said, if you're here to represent a foreign government, you are not welcome here. She was truly America first. And so no matter what issues we disagree with her on, let's remember two things. One, recently she was on the TV show The View, and she said she apologizes for being involved in all of the divisive issues and for saying terrible things about other members of Congress. She evolved. She apologized. Isn't that what we want members of Congress to do? And the other thing is we have to reward members of Congress who move on important issues like genocide, important issues like anti-war. So I just called her office and I left a message saying, Marjorie Taylor Greene, please reconsider, don't resign. We need your anti-war voice in Congress. And you can do the same. You can call her at 202-225-5211.
202-225-5211. 202-225-5211. If you care about Marjorie Taylor Greene not resigning, or at least want to make an attempt to figure out why it is that she's stepping away, as I said, I do believe there's more to it than this, dial that number right there, 202-225-5211, and leave a message. Jen, you can leave a message as a constituent. Say, I don't want you stepping down from Congress. Lord knows who you're going to get replaced with. That's the other thing that people tend to not think about. You see, when Debbie Wasserman Schultz gets replaced, I don't give a damn who it is. The person will not be worse than her. But whoever is going to replace Marjorie Taylor Greene is almost assuredly going to be a lot worse. We see the person that they're trying to replace Thomas Massie with. Not looking good. So, if you are so inclined, please give him a call.
Press 2 and tell her, please do not resign. Stay. Let's fight it out together. Let's end war.
And I agree. But as I said, I do think that we will see another move from Marjorie. She clearly has felt that, she's taken the congressional route as far as she can take it at this point. So she's going to seek not necessarily greener pastures, but, she is going for what will presumably be higher office. The governorship of Georgia seems to be the sensible move. I think she could run for president. I think she'd be an interesting candidate if she did, especially if AOC chooses to run. I think for must-see TV, I think that would be a huge attraction for a lot of people. So we'll see what ends up happening. But in the interim, I would definitely agree that right now, while a lot of people are wondering if she was threatened to step away, and I do believe she was threatened, but it probably doesn't really faze her whether she is being threatened or not. I think at the end, she knows that she's going to have to make a move at some point. And this was the time that she felt was right. And so she decided to do it when she knows that she's going to get her pension. I don't think that's a bad thing. She's been there for what is the middle of her third term now. Again, we're celebrating somebody stepping away from Congress after 5 years. Isn't that amazing? You know how rare that is? That somebody voluntarily steps away? It's not common, not somebody who's well known. Whereas Alex will sit there for 25 more years if she can get away with it. That's the downside of what Congress has become. And I would think that there is a lot of jealousy and envy towards people like Marjorie who really are just willing to say, I don't need this shit. Just like Massie. I don't need this. I'm doing it because I care. Good. We need more people like that. There's not a lot of people out there that are willing to go down that road. And of course, hats off to Medea. She is as good as anyone in left politics when it comes to the anti-war fight. She is one of a kind, and I totally understand her sentiment for wanting to go in that direction. It makes sense. It really does. And when you think about where we are right now, as far as, how are we going to do this? How are we going to figure out how to build these bridges? Thank you, Marie. We appreciate you doing that. And anybody else who's willing to help, it means a lot. And I have to say that while I'm not down on it, I recognize this moment where we're at and why this is so significant. We have a lot of super chats so far, so I want to get to you guys. I know this really means a lot, so I want to give a big shout out to Gazen82. Always a pleasure. MTG, you have my respect. Thank you for the $2. Toronto Law, thank you for the $24.99 Canadian A. We really appreciate you, my friend. Thank you very, very much. Welcome, Joseph Gordon, to becoming a YouTube member. Thank you very, very much. Shabbatadita? Okay. Thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member. We really appreciate it. And finally, Tay27555. Thank you for becoming a YouTube member. Very much appreciated. Jim Talib, always a pleasure. Thank you for the $5 super sticker. Gazen with the $5. USA doesn't want to fix immigration. It's no longer bringing your poor huddled masses yearning for freedom. It's a partisan issue argument now. I agree 1,000%, but it is a issue for multinational corporations. That's who benefits from it. That's more than anyone else. It's not about competing on the national stage. It's about how many different ways to Sunday can we F over the working class for the benefit of profit? That's it, pure and simple. Falling behind China or any other major country, be damned. It doesn't matter. India, for example. Libertarian Social Democrat with the 199. Pete, did you hear what phony AOC had to say? No, and I don't give a shit. Gazen, thank you again for the $2. I believe someone told MTG, quiet, Piggy, quiet, Peggy. Piggy, it sounds alike, but it's not the same. Libertarian Social Democrat with the 199 again. I hope MTG becomes a Joe Walsh Zio grifter. No, we don't want that. That's not necessary. Toodaloo 3 with the $2 super sticker. Thank you very, very much. Duly noted 2427 with the $5. They are anti-Zionist American PAC, Asa PAC, go Max. Agreed? If you haven't seen the clip that we've done for the Asa PAC, as well as the interview that we did with Michael Rechtenwald, we highly recommend that you check it out, guys. And if you are new here, make sure that you subscribe. Make sure that you smash that like button. Make sure that you share the stream. I want to try to get this out to as many people as we can. Libertarian Social Democrat, again with the 199. Could the Supreme Court strike down Florida redistricting? They'll probably attempt to, but considering what's passed in California, what's passed in Texas, at this point, like I said, does it really matter? What we have recognized is that the system is broken. It's not fixing itself. And we have to recognize that that is the future that is ahead of us. We are heading for revolutionary change. And if you don't think we are, hey, it's like the Trump train. Get on or get out of the way. That's kind of where we're at. And Shaitadan with a 199, Huckabee must be charged with treason and punished. You know, I couldn't agree more. I do agree that I Heart Huckabee is a loser of the highest order. And I also believe that we have to give people credit where credit is due when it comes to these coalitions that need to be built. I want to give a shout out to, he is a pastor in the Great Plains. His name is Chuck Baldwin. And he is somebody who believes that we need to get away from what is going on in not just with Israel's genocide, but he's also somebody who believes that Christian Zionism is going to be the death of Christianity. And I would agree with him, which is also why it's important for other pastors to step up and say what needs to be said. Very rarely have we seen, again, the televangelists very rarely are going to be the ones that are going to say anything that needs to be said because, again, this is a grift. This is a career. It's all about making money. This is what we have been reduced to. And right now, we are faced with that reality of, well, how are we going to get away from this? The ties are thick. But here is what Mr. Baldwin had to say.
Watching the horrific acts of a lifetime. In our entire life, we have never seen or never will see again the horrific acts that are now being committed before our very eyes by the Zionists against the Palestinian people. What's happening in Gaza is a Holocaust.
The difference between somebody like Mike Huckabee and Chuck Baldwin is somebody actually preaches or practices what they preach, whereas the other one is just a lunatic, genocidal psychopath. We're going to talk about Huckabee at greater length on Monday. But this is a reflection of the importance of the Christian Zionist combativeness that is going to become even more prevalent going forward. Chuck Baldwin is taking a huge chance by going after Christian Zionism. He is an evangelical preacher. This is a game changer. And this is a message that should be spread everywhere. We need more evangelical pastors saying, enough is enough. We are breaking ties with Israel. That's it. And no amount of bribery, because that's what it is going to change our minds on this point.
Christians and conservatives who support Israel are supporting a Holocaust. Talking about whatever Holocaust you think happened back in the 1930s. What about the Holocaust that's going on right before your eyes?
It depends on who's talking about it. You see, this is also the problem that I think a lot of people tend to forget. I often reference Whitney Webb, who says it is one nation under blackmail. And that is effectively what we're dealing with here. One nation under blackmail. So many of these preachers are either bribed or blackmailed or both. Chuck Baldwin has made his peace with God, and he knows that he's in harm's way by speaking out and using his large platform. And I also want to give a lot of credit to, I know this is coming from Breezy Politics, great channel to follow on Instagram if you don't already, guys. Keep this in mind. Any person who's a pastor or a rabbi that is political in any way, shape, or form, they're a politician. And they should have their tax-exempt status removed as a result. The separation of church and state must be crystal clear. There can be no distinction or exception. You are either practicing what is in the church and removing it from the state, or vice versa. And we all know that that line has been blurred one too many times. So credit where credit's due to Pastor Baldwin. He has a little more to say.
This egregious act of betrayal against the dignity and honor of the holy office of pastor must be opposed by pastors of conscience. If pastors have a conscience, they must speak out. How could a pastor see if they refuse to look, hear what is happening in Gaza today, and have no conscience to speak out against it? What does that tell you about that man? He's either a coward or he is a man without conscience.
Or he just wants to get his pockets lined, which is often the case. More than any other reason, that is why people are willing to look the other way. We've talked about this at length. When we addressed Sarah Horowitz, the reason she says what she says regarding the state of Israel and the need for more censorship is because it's for her benefit, it's her career benefit. That's the bottom line. Appreciate you, Hasdak. And guys, if you're not currently subscribed on Rumble, make sure that you do subscribe over there. Subscribe to Revolutionary Change on Rumble. We don't want to take any chances because we know at any time they can pull the rug out from under us. So just a simple subscribe. It's a backup. We are streaming currently on Rumble. We're also streaming currently on Instagram. So we're getting out there. And even though YouTube is obviously our home, this is where we want to be. And also, I ask each and every one of you, if an ad does pop up, if it's a short ad, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, if you let it play, that helps us grow our channel as well. That's a way of making a contribution to our channel without actually having to do a super chat or to go to patreon.com as well. So with that said, I really do believe that Mr. Baldwin is setting the type of precedent that is, it's vital. Just as Marjorie's move is a vital move, I cannot say enough about how much this matters. That a pastor is willing to put himself in harm's way, a well-known pastor, mind you, that has a pretty big platform, and is willing to say, we have to break away from Israel. This is necessary. Hats off. And the reason I bring this up is because right now, friend of the show, Ryan Grimm, has been hot on the trail of this Israel attachment with Jeffrey Epstein. And we know that the biggest reason that they don't want to talk about this, the reason why the Epstein files have been swept aside, again, the most vulnerable are always the pawns, like the women that were sexually abused. This is not what they're trying to protect. What they're trying to protect, the powers that be, is the intelligence connection between Epstein and Israel and the illicit behavior that has been going on for decades. You're aware of the relationship with Ehud Barak? I think that's how you say it, right? Epstein was connected to everybody. Congresswoman Plaskett was texting him during a hearing with Matt Taibbi. Matt Taibbi, where are you, baby? Come back to reality when you can. I want to play a quick clip from our friend Ryan Grimm, give us a quick update on where we're at right now and why this is so significant. The whole tie-in between Zionism, Epstein, and the state of Israel.
A breaking story over at Dropsite News on Jeffrey Epstein and the role that he played in developing Israel's offensive cyber weapons empire. This is the fifth in the series that we've been doing at Dropsite. If you Google Dropsite News and Epstein in Israel, you'll find the page where we're collecting them all. There's 5 so far. They're all worth a read. There'll be many more to come. This one in particular has the most psychedelic headline of a story that we've done yet, and it talks about the way that Epstein worked with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak with the Swiss bank Edmund de Rothschild in order to try to finance a cyber weapons empire. Epstein, everybody says, what Epstein, what did he really do? How did he really make his money? Well, we're answering that question piece by piece. And what he was doing here was attempting to create a fund of funds that would collect billions of dollars from warlords, sanctioned creatures, Israeli investors, American investors, Intel-linked firms, and build a cyber weapons empire that they would then sell around the country, and in the process also create security agreements between that country and the state of Israel. That's one of the major things that he was doing. Go read the story. You can learn more about it. Of the 5 pieces, the first one that we did is on a deal that Epstein brokered between the state of Israel and the state of Mongolia. And it was kind of a small story, but we picked that as the first one because it was easy to do, was easy to understand. We had the documents, we had the correspondence, and it was the first case that we could show of Epstein not just operating on behalf of the state of Israeli investors and like former prime ministers, but actually operating on behalf of the state of Israel.
It's always about Israel. It always will be about Israel. And just as Congressman Burchett said, why did Marjorie step away from Congress? It's because of her disagreement with Trump on Israel. That's the reason. I believe it. And I believe that there is no other reason why the Epstein files have been protected the way that they have. Like I said, that is not to downplay in any way, shape, or form sexual crimes, trafficking, and the like. But make no mistake, it is done as a means to an end. One nation under blackmail. And the very powerful, who have a lot to gain and lose with the state of Israel, is why this is happening. This is why the tentacles run so deep. Why do you think that the CIA, who on the anniversary, the 62nd anniversary of maybe the darkest moment in our nation's history, I don't think anybody at this point doubts that the CIA was involved in JFK's assassination. Does anybody doubt that the CIA is involved with the illicit behavior of the state of Israel and of when Jeffrey Epstein was operating the way he was? Who would doubt this? The files will come out and they'll reveal plenty of sexual deviance. But what they're desperately trying to scrub is information like what Ryan's talking about. How deep do these connections actually go? As you can see, they run very deep. And it's one of many reasons why we don't have nice things. Ryan has a little more to say.
We also did a story about how he helped set up a back channel between the state of Israel and Russia during the Syria civil war. One about how he helped broker a security agreement between Israel and Ivory Coast and sold Cote d'Ivoire, basically a surveillance state that the authoritarian president there has used to rewrite the Constitution and kind of crack down on dissent there. So go check these pieces out. I've noticed that they are kind of starting to penetrate the public consciousness. I see them referenced here a lot, and I appreciate everybody who's kind of overcoming the unwillingness of the mainstream media to talk about this situation. Like in about an hour, I'm actually going to be doing an interview with Australia's largest broadcaster, and there are a bunch of other kind of foreign broadcasters that have become really interested in these stories. But so far, the mainstream media in the United States has completely ignored them.
Gee, I wonder why. Ryan has to go outside the United States to get coverage of a vital part of the breaking of the American system. Hence why corporate media doesn't want any part of talking about it. They have to know at this point that their situation is extremely precarious. There's no way they can't. I know that the assumption is that it will eventually blow over. People will eventually give up. People will eventually not fight the way that they say that they will. But in reality, they're just going to go back to what they were doing before. Not this time. This is a revolutionary moment in this country. And I believe wholeheartedly that this is going to have reverberating effects. So here's to speaking truth to power. And Lord knows we need it now more than ever. One of the things that we consciously chose to do when we started this channel, even though we lean degrees of left politically from a populist perspective, is to always have honest conversations with as many, not even necessarily like-minded people, but people acting in good faith. There are many layers to how politics works in terms of how people form their vision of the world. It can be an emotional, it can be a philosophical, it can be social, it could be economic, whatever it is. As long as it's built on honesty and integrity, I believe that we should be having conversations with as many people as possible that we disagree with, not agree with. Because common sense and common ground are more or less one and the same. So when I came across John's channel, Dad Saves America, I didn't know what to think initially, because obviously it's conservative leaning, but it's very rational in a lot of ways. So I listened and I realized that on a number of topics, I agree. On others, I didn't. But it was done in a very professional and honest manner, which is not something that we get in the content space on too many channels, especially the ones that get big. And John's is big. And I do believe that when we have these conversations, we can take things in the direction that the country desperately needs to go in. John Papola, welcome to Revolutionary Change.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I do think that, as I alluded to, these conversations, I think, can go a very long way to determining how we're going to revolutionarily change this country, because we're clearly heading in that direction. Now, obviously, everybody has an opinion about how we get there. So for our audience who may not be familiar with you, how would you describe yourself politically, economically, so that they have an idea of how you became obviously a very influential fixture in what I consider to be populist right politics?
Well, you're being very complimentary. I appreciate that. I'll leave the audience to decide if your depiction of my influence is accurate. I would say I am fundamentally a classical liberal, which has got cracks in it more and more the longer I go. But, I came into this movement, so to speak, through Ron Paul. I was working at Spike TV as a creative director, and the Ron Paul phenomenon just hit me like a ton of bricks. It just was like, wow, this guy is like nothing I have ever really seen. And so he opened my eyes and my mind to a lot of different ways of thinking about what's going right and wrong with the institutions of this country. And I think more recently, I would say that in the spectrum of I would definitely say I'm on the right. You could call me a conservative, or I don't really care about these labels all that much. Yeah, but I think that what happened with COVID, what happened in the 2020s, what's happened with the mental health of our kids, and the sort of collapse of the sort of the intergenerational compact, let's say, has left me somewhat radicalized. I think we need very fundamental change. And I don't think this sort of marginal stick to the rules of the institutions approach will get us there. I think it'll give us more of the same. And that puts me in a very awkward position, because I think most of the times revolutions fail. And so it's a very scary moment, to be honest. I've never had more worries, frankly, about the future than I have right now. So I'm trying my best to navigate these waters, and I appreciate that you feel like I'm an honest broker, because I really just do try to be transparent about what I believe and try to steel man the things I disagree with, so that people can understand, hey, there's a good-hearted version of the thing I'm criticizing here. I just happen to think it's wrong.
Well, shout out to Ron Paul for opening a lot of eyes in the last 20 years, even before then. And shout out to friend of the show and his right-hand man, Daniel McAdams, who's been on our channel multiple times. I've had very fruitful conversations with him. I think that there is a great deal of intersection between libertarians and progressives, more so than I think a lot of them tend to not want to admit. I do think that the radical change that this country is inevitably going to have to accept is that the radicalization of the government as a whole, it's beyond drunk with power. We see what the concentration of unlimited wealth does. Sure, there's good, people with good intentions that want to try to make the world a better place. But for anyone who's ever been able to sustain legitimate success at a very high level, very few ever see the world altruistically the way that they need to. Very often they just get sucked up into capitalism and all the great benefits that come with it if you get to the top. As a father and as somebody who clearly is against, based on your conversations, especially with James Lindsay, who I'm not a fan of, the fear of going down the road of communism, socialism, and just all forms of Marxism is a great deal of concern for those that have A, succeeded in capitalism, and B, recognize that capitalism can no longer sustain itself, but that those ideologies are not the solution to how we transition. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I appreciate it. I know we got a chance to talk a little bit over the phone before getting this set up. So, I know we sort of touched on this a little bit. I think that if I want to steelman the argument for inequalities of power creating feedback loops that are fundamentally corrupt, right? If I want to say, like, what's the good-hearted progressive position? It's that the accumulation of power creates a political feedback loop where, the bigger you get, the more you can sort of tilt the political system to keep you there. And that becomes a zero-sum game in which you're extracting value from others. You're becoming a kind of unproductive rentier. Some amount of your value, some amount of your wealth is exploited, right? I think is a that's the most charitable depiction I think I can make of what I think the honestly held progressive view is on this. And I think that's a very valid critique when you look at existing institutions, when you look at the way politics really works and who benefits, when you look at the way Wall Street gets bailed out in 2008 and what happened there? How did that happen? How did bondholders get made whole for in all of that? That's completely crazy. Like, all of the rules of the game get suspended because there's too big to fail and all this sort of stuff. And I hear all that loud and clear. I think it's a very legitimate critique. I think the other angle, of course, is like the military industrial complex, foreign intervention sort of. In fact, I can even find myself locking arms with progressives on the international stage in a way that challenges a lot of the ways I think about things. Because when you think about how do we have this globally connected economy and the supply chains that rely on resources, materials, oil, lithium, et cetera, all around the world, it's hard not to say, like, hey, the military is keeping those shipping lanes open, and that creates some interesting relationships. It's like Mike Benz, I consider a friend. He talks about this stuff a lot. So, I lay all that groundwork to just say I kind of understand. I think I understand where that perspective is coming from, and there's a lot of opportunity for overlap. Where I fundamentally part ways.
Yes. And I will say that look, we're both participants in capitalism in our respective, choices as far as career. I was a small business owner for a decade. It got completely shot to shit as a result of the pandemic. I had to find a new path. I did find a new path, but not everybody does. Mm-hmm. And the reality of the world that we're living in today is that the wealth concentration has become a big problem. If I were to pinpoint, and there were plenty of policies that happened, everyone talks about Reagan. But the reality is this country's been going straight to hell since what now is the 62nd anniversary of maybe the darkest moment in our nation's history. And that was Jack's assassination in Dallas. And as a result, it became this sort of aha moment for so many people who realize that this country is not what you think it is. The president is not the person in charge. They're just a figurehead. Now, some of them go rogue and some of them do things on their own, very rarely. But we have this ruling class that most people don't get to see. They don't know that they exist. They don't know that there are people that are so rich that they own apartment buildings in New York and they don't even fill them with people. They just hang on to them. For what reason, I still can't understand. But that's a level of wealth and power that most people will never be able to comprehend. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And while there are probably enough people walking in the halls of the Capitol right now that are trying to let people know that, I know you don't think people are at the gates with pitchforks and, tiki torches, but they're coming. Like, this is going to have to change at some point. Like, somebody is going to have to recognize why this change is going to be necessary. People can't afford to live. And I would say of all the policies that would be considered left, even though it shouldn't be, to me, it's the most common sense social policy or economic policy that should benefit this whole country. And that, of course, is healthcare. and that would be single payer. There is no other solution that has worked in every other.
We disagree. We disagree quite profoundly on that one.
Okay, so hit me with your excuse as to why single payer doesn't work or wouldn't work, even though it works in every other developed country on earth.
Well, okay. Let me take a step back, but I'll come to the healthcare by way of the bigger picture as I best understand it and what informs me. If I'm going to grant you something that I think is true, which is that we have oligarchic forces in our country, especially in healthcare. Healthcare is absolutely a cartelized mess in America. We do not have a free market. We have not had what I would consider to be a free enterprise system in a very long time. We have what the French would call a dirigisme, a mixed state-directed economy. That is what we have had certainly since FDR, but especially post the Great Society. The little nips around the edges of deregulation that happened with Carter and then Reagan and then to some extent Clinton don't change the fact that in like the 1950s, 95% of jobs did not require a government license, which erects barriers to competition. And today, like 50% of every occupation requires you to get permission from the government in the form of a license, including being a florist. You have to get a government permission slip in something like 30 states in this country to do interior decorating. And who issues that license? A commission of people who are the current local heads of current companies. And so I think what you have, and this is the I think the break point between an honest progressive who's not just sort of spouting slogans and an honest, like classical liberal, libertarian, whatever, free market type.
Sure.
That's not just spouting slogans. Government is a monopolizing force. It is a tool that gets exploited to create barriers to competition. It always has been. It is what it is. That is its nature. It is inescapable. And the problem, so that's a political problem, but then it creates an economic problem that is very profound, and most people don't really grapple with this. And that is that most things are far too complex for some central planner to decide. You know, when you think about healthcare is a perfect example of this. Healthcare is the delivery of services, right? It is not, that's what it is. I come from a family of doctors. My dad's an otolaryngologist, a surgeon. Both of his parents actually were doctors. In fact, my grandmother, Mary Longo, God rest her soul, delivered babies. She was a female doctor in Philadelphia when there were no female doctors around. And she was also the loudest critic of feminism you would ever meet. But when you look at what ails us in this country when it comes to healthcare, the question is, what is it that we're talking about? We're talking about, can you afford to get the services you need for what is ailing you? And will they work or not? And how quickly can you get them? Can you get them quickly enough to actually deal with the problem? That is like that, you know, we talk about this stuff and it becomes like, oh, well, who's going to pay? Who's going to cover? Are you covered? Do you have insurance? All of that is like all these intermediary middlemen between like, I have a problem with my health and I need someone or some medicine or some treatment to help it, to mend it, to fix it, to ameliorate it, to keep it at bay, to keep it controlled. That's what we're talking about. And that is like this.
Let's pause there for a second.
Yeah.
So we agree 100%. The whole purpose of why I am an advocate for single payer healthcare is because I want to remove the for-profit middlemen in between us and our doctors. I believe in the free market. I believe that if a doctor is good enough to make $1 million a year because he's the best one in the market for heart surgery, then he's entitled to make that. I think we need more nurses that are more well compensated. I do not understand how anyone thinks it's acceptable that we have for-profit hospitals. I don't know how anyone thinks it's acceptable that there is any reason to have Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross, and yes, United. The whole concept behind the Luigi Mangione story is the fact that there were people that went up in arms about a healthcare, and again, it's not a healthcare, it's pro-health CEO or for-profit health CEO that bit the bullet, no pun intended, and yet that person is probably responsible for tens of thousands of deaths a year because of the for-profit nature of the health system. And so it depends on how you kill someone. If you kill someone with a gun, it's a problem. You kill them with a fountain pen, it's acceptable. And that in itself is where I think things have to change significantly. Now, we know that any other country that you want to measure it to, and there are ones that are clearly better than others. If you are as successful as I believe you are, and you probably are a world traveler, you've been to other parts of the world, whether it's France, whether it's Germany, whether it's Japan, whether it's Australia, 4 of the countries, all of the Scandinavian countries, they all have superior healthcare available compared to what we have here. And obviously at a fraction of the cost. So what my proposal is.
No, I don't agree with a lot of that. I as a matter of fact.
Okay.
So I like we can like let me make the case for, because I'm not making the case for the status quo. Let me just say this: if you made me king for a day today, what I would do is, I mean, you know, if you said implement your perfect system, well, I'm kind of a libertarian utopian if you really push me to the ethical limits, and I would say, well, get the government out of all of it. But if I was going to be incrementalist and create something better, I would create something like a universal, high deductible, catastrophic plan where you come out of pocket right up until the point where you really, really are in a big situation. So I don't know how you'd probably have to adjust it for cost of living in different areas. But the problem with American healthcare is not the profit motive. I think that is very fundamentally untrue.
Okay, so then let me push back on you.
But let me just make a couple points real quick to that. 80% of the hospitals in this country are not for profit.
Sure.
Many of them Catholic. Now, the for-profit, not-for-profit is also kind of a canard because many of these nonprofit hospitals, we have one here, Ascension Health here in Austin, and their CEO makes $3 million a year. Now, you can say like, well, isn't that profit? And the answer is, well, kind of, yes, it is. Right? They don't technically issue dividends. They don't have stockholders that benefit from the rising value of the company. So in that sense, it's not a for-profit. But I think the problem is that this notion that pursuing retained earnings at the end of the year is the root of the problem in healthcare, I think is more ideological than factual. And there's several examples of why that's why. One of which is it in most states in this country, if you want to open a hospital, or even if you want to in your clinic add an MRI machine, you have to get approval in what's called a certificate of need, as if there should be need to be an explanation of why we need more supply of healthcare services. But that is a fact. That is a legal structure in place in this country, in a country whose most of their hospitals are not-for-profit charitable entities, technically. Why? Because that's the government monopoly power. So when you have this ability of the government to regulate the supply of healthcare services, it turns out the local hospitals, which are big political players, for profit or not, like these rules that make it so that they don't get competed with. And that just is shot through the entire system. It's completely crazy. So and I think on the European front, the fact is that they all ration care in one form or another. We do spend a lot more as a total share of GDP than European countries on average by quite a bit. We have better health outcomes on a whole range of measures. And we also have worse in many instances. However, one of the things you have to do when you look at the stats on the outcomes, like American health, American interaction with the healthcare system, is you have to strip out the stuff that's got nothing to do with healthcare. For example, if we have a lot more gang violence involving guns, that's got nothing to do with healthcare. Like the fact that more people die in the ER of gunshot wounds in the United States than in Sweden is not an indictment of the US healthcare system. And that kind of stuff, the extent to which we have greater levels of fatalities, the extent to which our population is fatter and sicker because of lifestyle diseases, like basically being overweight, our food system is a catastrophe. But those are also personal choices people make. I'm just saying, like, it's very easy to say it's all about we just need to have the government, who's been a bad actor in the States pretty much throughout, up and down the entire system. If they just take over the whole thing, and I think the argument for this is really weak. It's basically slogans. And the last thing I'll say, and I'm happy to just have as much back and forth on this as you want. I don't know how anybody can look at the way the government and the leading institutions of healthcare in this country and around the world handled COVID and come out of that saying, yeah, I want those people to be the only ones that decide whether my healthcare services will be paid for or not. Like, I don't get it. I don't get how single payer. I'd be curious, like, how did COVID not kill your desire to have the government that locked us down, lied to us at every turn?
Well, I'm gonna interject there because here's the thing: there is a difference between government funded versus government run. I think that people have a really hard time understanding that there is a distinction between whether or not you have a single payer system that still supports a free market economy. If a doctor is capable of doing the job better than the next doctor, he's capable of making what he's capable of making. I don't have any issue with that. But what I do have a problem with is that there is no point in having for-profit middlemen in between us and our doctors. We are the only developed country on earth that has medical debt. We're the only country on earth that has a healthcare system in which over 70,000 people that we're aware of die every year as a result of lack of care or undercare. Then you also take into account that we have a free market economy based on whether or not people will live or die. So the idea that you can trade—
but that's not really, again, with all due respect, in every single country on this planet, there are people who don't get the healthcare services they need to keep them alive. Sure. And they die as a result.
Sure.
So like, it's not the case that I would say, look, there's big differences across the spectrum. Switzerland has a system that technically is more for-profit oriented than America, in which more of it is managed by a more truly competitive market and private insurance companies. France has single payer, but doesn't own and operate the hospitals. Canada and the UK, both of whom suck. And the NHS in the UK is a constant political problem, and it's getting worse by the year.
Yes,
that's a wholly owned government-run job.
I definitely listen. I've heard enough stories about what's going on in Canada. I know that there is rationing of care. It also depends on what city you're in and what province you're in. Anyone that I've ever spoken to that's from Calgary will tell me that it's the worst system ever. And then I'll talk to people who are in Vancouver and they'll say it's the best system ever. So it really just depends.
And the same thing goes for Sweden. Sweden has a very decentralized system where the funding is decentralized. I think you're right about this. And I'm not one of those people that just clumps all these things together as some monolith of socialism. There's a bunch of different systems, and some of them get closer to a free market, profit-oriented system than ours. I just think that it's very easy with something this complex.
All right, so let me put a suggestion to you, because I think that what puts a button on this topic, because you obviously stand where you stand. I do not. Like I said, there are people who simply think that there should be no profit motive whatsoever in healthcare. Okay, I understand that. But you know what? As we said when we briefly spoke on the phone, the problem with people on the left is they do not take human spirit into account. The people on the right do not take human greed into account. So trying to find that medium where we can come together and recognize that this is what is absolutely necessary in order to survive and thrive. I think whatever it's going to take to eliminate that for-profit middleman who does not need to exist, I think is the first step. Now, you may not agree with single payer, but what I've often suggested, as I do with my libertarian friends, I'll give you one, you give me one. I support ending the Fed. If I give you supporting ending the Fed, I want you to give me supporting single payer. And we'll figure out how to make it, and we'll figure out how to make it work in a system that does not require people to go bankrupt in order to stay alive, because we're the only country that has it that's developed. Yes, there's problems all over the world. We all know it. However, it is painfully clear that the system we have is the only one that is based on profit at this level in terms of development. Yes, these other countries have problems. No one is going to say that they're perfect. And yes, money talks and justice walks. If you have money, that's a huge advantage over those that don't. But that's not an excuse. People need to have health in order to live. And it also is of tantamount importance to have some type of a meeting of the minds in terms of this is where things are going, this is where they need to go. But also, there are people who, I agree with you, John, rely way too heavily on whether or not the government can save them. It doesn't work. That's why I'm very libertarian in a lot of ways as well. The government can't save you. The government should exist, but the way it exists today is to basically trap you. And that is where things, I believe, go off the rails. And just taxing people more, that's not the solution. That's not how you're going to do it. There are ways to do it. But from where I stand, healthcare, that is without question the number one issue that I believe the left has correct in terms of the baseline. Now, how we get there, that's going to be the bigger trick. And that is, to me, something that someone who has experienced different health systems, and I can assure you, the model that we have, maybe not the care, because that's a point you bring up, which is fair. I can understand that. But in terms of the model, we have the worst model in the world as a developed country, period. I would never give an inch on that, because I think anyone who has seen what this health system has done to people that I know, and this health system has killed people I know that I cared about.
I mean, look, let me grant you something fundamentally.
Sure.
Like, I am not a defender of this system. I mean, let me just tell a very quick story, because I know we want to talk about some other stuff.
Sure.
I got, I got COVID. I think this was 2023, summer 2023. I was struggling to swallow. I go to the doc, ear, nose, and throat doctor here in town. Looks down the throat, says it's covered in sores. She's like, there's nothing really that can be done about this. You're okay. You just need to basically gargle some painkiller and wait it out.
Yeah.
She writes me a script to walk across the street to the hospital to just get an IV to replenish, because I haven't been able to drink any water, and she doesn't want me to get dehydrated. And I ask her, I say, Doc, I don't want to go to the ER and get some $5,000 frigging bill to get IV saline and a gargle of some Novocaine, because I'll just go home. Can you promise me that that's not what's going to happen? And she, oh no, for sure not. It's a script. I go in, I walk in. It's like, okay, I'm in front of the lady in front, checks me in. I ask her, what's the deal here? What's this going to cost? Nobody knows what anything's going to cost. I go in, there's nobody there. I go into a room that feels like it's 1989 Ukraine, because that's what hospitals feel like. I get a gargle and an IV, and I get a $5,000 fucking bill, which I don't pay for a year. I just don't pay it. I'm like, I'm not paying this. What is this? This is a nonprofit Catholic hospital system. And it's because it was the ER, even though I literally, I know it's like, I should have known, I shouldn't have even walked in. So I know, I know what it feels like. I know what it is. I'm not disembodied from the absolute bitter rage we all experience when you go and deal with this effing system. I'm just saying, people that fix things, the precursor to fixing things is properly diagnosing what's broken. And I think we disagree on what's broken here by focusing on profit instead of the massive regulatory catastrophe that is below the surface. And it just is. I can geek out on this stuff, and it flies over, and people are like, yeah, what are you talking about? You're carrying water for the insurance companies or something. It's like, no, it's not.
But here's the bottom line. If there is a profit motive, then the goal is always to extract as much profit from it as possible. Because in the end, if you are
yes, that's true at the individual level. But even Karl Marx understood that one of the things about the reason why Marx believed that capitalism would kind of deliver a suicidal post-scarcity world is because he recognized that competition is what squeezes the profit out of the system. So we have an insufficiently competitive system. I am with you. I don't want excess profits. I just believe that competition, I'm kind of with Karl Marx on this. Competition will wring the profit out and keep it under control. And a monopoly just creates bureaucracy and creates administrators. And those are all people who are profiting on the system.
But who wants that? But who wants that? The people who want Neither do I. Neither does anybody else. But the only people who want it are the people that are financially benefiting from the system. That's why there's so much government regulation. This is why I keep saying it until I'm blue in the face. There is so much more crossover between progressives and libertarians than they are generally willing to admit. That's why I listen. First of all, James Lindsay's got to learn to get that smug look off his face every time he's in front of a camera. Because he's got so much rage at the world. And I keep thinking and it's like the chat is saying, on the one hand, they hate you. And then the next minute, they're like, oh, John's so close to understanding what this is. I know you understand what this is. I also understand where your philosophy comes into play. I agree with you. I don't want the government running it. But that's not what single payer is. There is this idea that everyone wants to turn this into the VA. That's not what we want.
I'll tell you what, my middle ground is we can lock arms on a single, very high deductible insurance plan that makes sure nobody goes bankrupt, but otherwise helps you pay cash, let you pay cash. If you had to pay cash, if the doctor's office didn't have 5 people in accounting, but it was mostly doctors, not administrators, and you paid cash, they'd tell you what the price is. You decide, like every other service in our whole friggin' society, including food, which is more important than healthcare. You go to the grocery store, you're like, you know what? This is too expensive. I'm going to get the cheap one. And then that would take care of a huge amount of the problem. You'd be left with stuff like my kid's born with leukemia, or I have a chronic rare disease. That's all real. That's why I'm saying, look, I've got a middle ground for you, but that's as far. We need price signals. We need competition. We need choice. We need people being able to walk, vote with their feet. That's the part of it that keeps it honest to me.
My experience with most doctors is that they are actually willing to accept what you're able to pay if you can get the bureaucracy the hell out of their business. You eliminate.
Right. It's like the Oklahoma Surgery Center. You go up there, they're like, okay, how much is the knee surgery? It's $2,500 cash, and they don't take insurance. So they don't have a gigantic administrative bloat thing where they submit something to the insurance company and then you get a bill that's not a friggin' bill, and it's what is this? And then you get another bill, but it's like, don't pay that, and then wait 6 more months, and then it's 30% of the cost, and it's like, why did I get 4 bills that aren't a bill? It's like, anyway, I know we want to talk about other stuff, but I mean, I can talk for 4 hours about healthcare.
Yes, and it was perfect timing for you to come on tonight because obviously, look, you were a Manhattan resident. As I said, you clearly see what's happening right now. Luckily, I don't live in, I am a Florida resident and proud to be a Florida resident, but I'm not a South Florida resident anymore. And I know quite a few of the affluent who probably already have a condo or a beach house somewhere along A1A in either Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, or Miami. They're just going to spend more time there than they normally would in New York, and probably claim permanent residence and only be there part of the year in New York. Point is, there is this fear, this concern about the socialist supposedly taking over New York. And what
I think he's a socialist. I think we can trust him when he says that he's a socialist.
I would believe that Zohran is probably pretty forthcoming about who he is. But what cannot be denied is that this meeting that these two had the other day was clearly very impactful. Now, we all listen. If you've met him, I met him once years ago. He's a really interesting person. But here's what I'll tell you: if you just tell me how great I am and how I'm making America great again. He loves flattery. It's Trump. Good. Yeah, no, but that's his modus operandi. Trump is all about business, and he loves people who congratulate him and appreciate him. And I have no doubt that Zohran made quite an impression over the last 24 hours. And the fact of the matter is, he probably was very direct with him and very honest. He didn't ask for too much. He just said, look, I want to make New York City a better place to live. Your home. Yeah. And it probably charmed the shit out of him, and it worked. How do you think things went down the other day?
I only saw a couple clips of this, including the one that was just sort of like just amazing, where some reporters like, so do you think President Trump's a fascist? And he's like, oh, you can just say yes, it's fine, just say yes.
So do you want to call me a despot? That's fine. I don't really mind it. It's a rose off the back.
The funny thing is, and I've done a bunch of videos on Mr. Mamdani, as you know, and I've met the president very briefly. Although, I will say I used to wait tables in Atlantic City at Trump Marina when I was going to college. So I actually used to see Trump run it back and forth in the late 90s while I was waiting tables at the midnight shift. Trump's not an ideological guy. He's just not. I think your depiction of his personality is exactly accurate. He is won over by flattery. He likes winners. He likes personality. He likes showmen. So these two guys that pictured here, they have all that in common. And that's fine. That doesn't produce outcomes. That's just good politics. And I voted for Trump. It was, there's a whole bunch of stuff I'm not happy about, and there's stuff that I am happy about. But I think I can't get past the whole, are your ideas going to work? And I think when it comes to Mr. Mamdani, his ideas are terrible. His diagnosis is great in the sense that, he actually was talking about the punishing cost of living crisis going on in New York City. But his ideas won't work even if implemented. And I'm sort of divided between hoping he gets to do everything he wants versus hoping that he doesn't get to do any. Having lived in New York City, I can tell you, in fact, I very briefly lived in a rent-controlled apartment. I think it's half of the rentals in New York City are rent-controlled. And he's like, we're going to freeze the rents. Okay. Well, what most people don't know that heard that is that all you do is shift the cost to another margin. And what that margin is political connections. So how did I get in that place? Because I was working at MTV. I was young. I was making no money. But a buddy of mine who was a New York native, he got in, and I subletted the sublet to get in. It was just a who you know scam. Charlie Rangel, the former congressman of New York, had 4 rent-controlled apartments under his control. That's all you do. When you say, I'm going to cap the price, it's no different than when the PlayStation 6 comes out and they put it at $5.99 and you can't find one. The price emerges somewhere else. And the problem is when you do that, and this is just plain old econ, I know people are going to be like, shut up, but it's just all you're doing is you're preventing people from building more housing. My buddy Josh, it took him 6 frigging months to put up a non-load bearing wall to convert his junior 4 apartment into a 2-bedroom in Brooklyn. 6 months of building inspectors and approvals and the condo board and back to he went to the office of the building inspector and they said, you need to bring the forms. And he's like, well, do you have the forms? And they're like, no, we don't have the forms. I'm like, well, where do I get the forms? There's actually a cart out front that sells the forms for us. And so again, it's sort of like saying it's all about profit. None of that shit's going to work. Freeze the rent's going to make it worse along every single dimension.
All right, so I'll ask you a question. You know who John, much better. Again, I grew up with Italians my whole life. I'm usually better at pronouncing Italian names than I am Greek names. And John Katsimatidis. Okay, so you know who he is.
Owner of Gristedes?
Yes. So he's a multi-billionaire, and he is somebody who has been on a
he's a big
radio
Republican
show,
right-winger.
Yeah, radio show of a person that I knew pretty well back in the day, Sid Rosenberg, and clearly today he and I would never speak again for obvious reasons. He would constantly put down Zohran, saying he doesn't know what he's talking about. The one policy that I actually think could work that Zohran is preaching is the single government-run grocery store in each of the 5 boroughs. And I use John's methods as an example as to why this is something that's going to come to the forefront. And I think if Zohran is smart, if he wants to get one policy through and get it through fast, this is the one. It has been reported forever that John completely takes for granted his employees, treats them terribly, underpays them, and he completely price gouges the shit out of his clientele. So if you bring in this concept of a government-run grocery store, naturally, anyone's going to look at that and say, well, how could that possibly work? Well, it'll work to this degree. If you go into one of John's supermarkets and he's charging $12 for a dozen eggs, but then you go into one of these, we'll say, what would be considered a part of Manhattan where people are struggling, maybe some parts of the Lower East Side, obviously the Bronx.
Yeah, Avenue D, whatever.
So let's say
all of Manhattan's out of reach now at this point, but regardless.
So let's say we just stick it there for argument's sake,
sure.
somewhere on the East Line away from the Holland Tunnel. But the point is, if you're going to put it anywhere, you put it somewhere there where people desperately need it. But then people all of a sudden see, oh, how come that grocery store is getting a dozen eggs for $3? What exactly is going on here? Well, that's leveling the playing field of the free market as far as I'm concerned. Now, you don't need to turn everybody's grocery store into a government-run chain. But what you do need to do is recognize that if the cost of living has gotten to the point that people simply cannot afford to survive, and food's very important, if this is going to help level the playing field, and it's not going to allow people that are living in different boroughs to have to come to Manhattan. If it's the Bronx, if it's Queens, if it's even in Staten Island, I know Staten Island won't be too fond of it, but point is, if there is an opportunity to control at least, well, not even control's not the right word because everyone thinks it's a control thing. No, it is actually creating more competition, as you were alluding to earlier. If you want people to shop at your store, well, it's going to be very hard, John Katsimatidis, to get people to buy your $12 eggs when someone else is selling it for $3. If they were selling it for $10, $10.50, yeah, they might just happen to like your store and they're going to come there. If it's $3, not happening. They will jump on the train for 2 hours to get to that grocery store in order to go shop there. Now you could say, oh, well, the lines will be crazy. Yeah, they might be. But at the end of the day,
there's a much simpler issue here because grocery store profit margins are like 1% to 2%.
Yeah, they're small. They're pretty thin.
Right? So the thing that drives food prices is inflation, first and foremost. It's weather and it's inflation. It is commodities. So the price of eggs is set. I mean, I did a documentary about the way animals are raised for food, and I spent 6 months crossing 26 states, meeting with farmers large and small. It was about sort of the ethics of it. I mean, I think most people would see this film and think of it like something on the left. It's very open-hearted about animal welfare. Which is a luxury good. That's really at the end of the day. If you're worried about putting food on the table for your family, I don't think you give two flying, F's about how well the chickens are treated. But the reason why You go to Whole Foods and you see cage-free eggs or pasture-raised eggs where the chickens get to move around outside. And they're $7.99, $8.99. And like the carton of eggs at the gas station in the foam, not the nice cardboard, but the good old foam crate, are $3.99 a dozen. That's because one of them is made on a massive assembly line in Iowa. That's high productivity, and one is not. One is low productivity. And the amount of margin in these things is tiny. So if Zohran wants to set up some city-run grocery stores, I think that's stupid. I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. That's not really socialism. That's just government getting into a business it probably has no business getting into. You could say, well, that's a public option. Okay. It's just the profit margins on these things are just so slim. It's just it's not going to be the choice between that. In fact, the profit margins are so slim that the difference is between being like a good operator that knows how to run the thing, knows how to maintain proper inventory that balances what people need. You know, food expires on the shelf unless it's canned goods, right? Or dry goods. So if you're not good at that, you'll blow through that 1-2% profit margin just in food waste on the shelves if you're not good at managing all that stuff. And so again, I know, like, I'm looking at the comments, they're like, you know, dad's destroying America. That's fine. I understand. I'm not a guy that panders. I am what I am. I think what I think. But
let me ask you this, since obviously you and I could probably talk for hours, and I'm sure we'll grab a coffee at some point when we're
it'll be great.
Has capitalism failed? Has capitalism failed America? How about that?
Well,
you have to be able to be, and I'm asking you this because you have to be able, this is something that I've tried explaining to people that I know that are successful like you. It's difficult at times when capitalism has done right by you to be able to take a step back from it and say, but is it really something that is plausible for most people? Is it plausible that the average person can truly succeed in this system? And as somebody who is in a position right now personally, where I may be in a position to be doing pretty well, potentially, I can never lose sight of how difficult it is, not just to catch the break, especially if you don't have any of that guidance or assistance to get there, but that the system in general, forget how bad it's gotten over the last several years, but in general, this is a system that is designed for very few people to succeed in. And I'm wondering if you feel the same way.
Well, I guess this is you've asked, has capitalism failed? I would say this: the American political economic system is breaking down for a lot of people. I do believe that. I wouldn't call what we have now capitalism. We have an extremely mixed economy. And that sets up the question of which part of the mix, is it the eggs or the flour that's made the mix suck, has made it too thick to swallow. I think that when you look at the fact that the percentage of 30-year-olds who are married and own a home has gone from over 50% in like 1980 to below 15% today, I don't see how you can look at that and say, oh, that's an economic and political system that's healthy and working and delivering intergenerational progress. No, that's a system that is a whole picture of a society that, from my perspective, is going in the wrong direction.
I look at different policies that were passed over the years. I do believe that if there is a proper way to tax the rich, I believe there's only one way to do it, and that is a top marginal tax rate. It's what worked during FDR through JFK, and then obviously we saw what happened under Reagan. I believe that, like any market, when things are going good, you increase taxes. When things are going bad, you reduce taxes. Reagan came in and reduced the top marginal rate from 72 down to 50. I believe he should have held it. And probably if it stayed at 50% as it would be today, which is where it probably should be, I think a lot of the problems probably wouldn't exist. Now, there were many other things that took place over that time. But I personally believe in terms of actual policy that was passed in the United States, there is no worse president than Bill Clinton. In fact, I can recite all 5 policies that I passed that absolutely ruined America. I did NAFTA. I did normal trade relations with China. I did the crime bill. I did the Telecom Act. And then probably the worst policy that has been passed, not just during my administration, but maybe over the last century, is the removal of Glass-Steagall. And to me, if I were to say universally, it's at least on the domestic side, the worst president, foreign policy-wise, in my lifetime, bar none, is George Bush. And the fact that all of these shit libs, as I like to call them, showed up at Cheney's funeral just goes to show you, as Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it. But as far as the policies that were passed, perhaps capitalism would be working for a hell of a lot more people. There would be much more of a balancing act if we didn't go through these periods that we've went through over the last 2 generations. And I believe at this point, more than any other reason, why socialism and, dare I say, communism is looking attractive to a lot of young people is because they're now bearing the weight of these policies that were based solely on greed and nothing more, is why we're here. Now, maybe we could have changed things for the better in some respects, but if I'm looking at any reason why it's failing, I do believe that the policies in particular that Clinton passed, it contributed quite a bit.
I like you a lot. We disagree a lot on a lot of that stuff, but I will say this.
I like you too. You're not too bad.
I think the problem when you raise taxes, and we're going to end up with higher taxes because there's no way we're not ending up with higher taxes one way or another, either through the front door or the back door, right? They'll print the money or they'll extract it one way or another. The government just sucks at doing stuff. It just does. It just sucks. And the reason it sucks is not because there's plenty of greedy people in government. We call them politicians. The problem is it doesn't have the feedback loops to error correct. It just doesn't have them. That's why we get these monstrous forever wars. Because where's the feedback loop? It's all spending other people's money. So the 50s was this halcyon time for both the left and the right. The right thinks it's great because of the social norms of the 1950s, the marriage, the lack of people wearing jeans to work, all kinds of stuff. And the left thinks it's great because you had this narrowed inequality and high marginal tax rates. Fact of the matter is, in the 1950s and 60s, the percentage of GDP that the government took in as tax revenue was about the same as it is right now. Because what happened is nobody paid those 90% tax rates. They just didn't. They didn't pay them. So they just put their compensation in other forms.
You're bringing up a good point, because when I talk about top marginal tax rate, everyone thinks, oh, they're paying 90% in taxes. Like, no, they're not. They're paying an effective tax rate. Again, the highest effective tax rate that this country ever had was under Eisenhower, and it was effectively 43% for the absolute richest of the rich. But I think there is a misnomer in terms of, and this is, again, like I said, this brings the whole conversation full circle in terms of how do libertarians and progressives actually get together. I'm of the mind that there are too many cheat codes in the system for the rich to just avoid paying anything, because if you think the heavy-handedness of just bringing the hammer down and say, we're just going to tax them they're going to fund politicians to pass laws to make sure they pay nothing. So there has to be a better solution.
Here's where I would like to lock arms. And that is, I think that what we have in this society that is fundamentally unjust, and I will say it along several dimensions, some of which are very unpopular but I'm going to say it anyway, is we have a Byzantine legal order constructed for the sole purpose of very particular people's privileges. That's what it is. We have a legal system that benefits those that can afford fancy lawyers. We have a regulatory structure in healthcare and finance, in particular, healthcare and finance in particular, that basically make it that the big guys stay on top because they can have the big lawyers and they can lobby and they've rigged the rules in their favor. So I think where progressives and classical liberal, conservative, libertarian, whatever, more free market, more government skeptic types, we should lock arms to go to war on all of the privileges for the rich and powerful, for the corporate sector, for the bailouts, the subsidies, the protection, the liability protections that are unwarranted, that create moral hazard. Now, the other piece, this is going to be harder, is I think it's time for us to revisit the way we have set up the privileges that we treat on the basis of race and gender, because I think that stuff's all got to go as well. I think every individual human in this country should be treated by the law as equal, with no special privileges, because these special privileges are ripping this country apart. So, the race and gender stuff is ripping the boys apart and pushing them to the Nick Fuentes types. And the corporate special privileges, the Sam Altman getting it in his head that he knows he's going to get a bailout because he's too big to fail and he's got access to the White House. Fuck that. No. Enough is enough.
Now, that is a great place to conclude the conversation, because if there is one place that libertarians and progressives definitely agree, is that if you're going to have socialism, you better have it for everybody. If you think socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for everybody else is acceptable, that's not going to work. And that is exactly where the locking arms, if you will, with libertarians does make sense. If we can get to a consensus, which I think we can, on that particular problem, which is destroying this country, again, they take the profits, they socialize the losses. Mm-hmm. And to me, therein lies probably the greatest flaw in the system. Scam Altman, as Aziz just said. It's true. He's one of the worst. You also have to remember the problem with a lot of the tech bros, and you're in tech bro heaven right now, a lot of them are really lacking in interpersonal communication skills. Now, take with that what you will. There's many reasons for that, but they are. Yes. Asperger's is
literally. It very much is like an Asperger.
Yeah. And of course, they are masters of the universe, and having that lack of interpersonal communication skills, which I believe Elon in particular is one that is lacking, among others, it creates a real problem. And so what we have to do is continue to have these conversations, even if it hurts, because I know some people in the chat didn't like it, but hey, we had agreements, we had disagreements, but all in all, I think you're a decent fella. And I think that whether I'm in New York or Austin at some point where we can cross paths, I look forward to it. Maybe I'll join you at some point, especially if I'm in town. And let's continue this conversation going forward, John. I really appreciate you coming on this evening.
Look, I appreciate you reaching out. I think you're coming at this in an honest way. I'm trying to do the same. I've been trying to. I've had one eye on the comments here, so it's like it's okay. It's okay. You can flame throw me. That's fine. And if we can't talk to each other and hash things out, then the country is well and truly lost. And so, God bless you for inviting me to come on and spar a little bit. And we'll have to do it again sometime.
Amen, brother. Have a happy Thanksgiving and a Merry Christmas, and we will talk again real soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks,
the best.
Bye-bye. So that was a fun conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know we didn't agree on everything, and that's okay. We don't have to. What we have to do is synergistically cross-pollinate with both networks and let people decide for themselves what is the best way forward. But more than anything else, we cannot live in a country that is owned and operated by a select few oligarchs that is deciding that the only way for us to have any discourse is whether or not we agree with trans bathrooms or trans athletes. I mean, again, this has gotten to the point where we're going to be choking. John Papola is Catholic, Italian Catholic from Philadelphia. But thank you, Pirate John. Thank you for being a smartass. Appreciate you. And look, I agree. John is wrong, in my humble opinion, on healthcare. I believe that single payer is the only solution. And I don't care if there's arguments to be made about what the system has, doesn't have. It's true. The system is not perfect. But you know what? Single payer would sure look perfect to most people compared to what we have now. And that's a fact. With that said, we've got a couple of big stories to still get to. We appreciate you guys hanging around. I know a few of you dipped out. I know it wasn't everybody's cup of tea, but we're going to have some fun. I do want to get to the super chats before we get going again. We're going into the two main topics of the evening, which I hope you guys will enjoy. Where did we leave off? Let's see. Right here. Job 49. Thank you very much for the $5. I am following because Pastor Baldwin is my pet. Wow, that's awesome. Liberty Fellowship is my church. His sermons are on YouTube weekly. Godspeed, brother. I hope he is as good on the stump as he appeared in that clip. Thank you very much for becoming a YouTube member. And thank you so much for getting into the holiday spirit and gifting 5 Revolutionary Change memberships. Thank you very, very much. Gator highlights 4 with the $10. True intentions behind a couple of MTG's recent OK takes aside, we're not actually falling for her apology for fanning the flames of toxic politics, are we? Listen, you're only as good as you are today and will become. I am not going to sit here and say that I've been saying it constantly. I don't trust Marjorie, but I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt if she's sincere. I think that anybody should accept that philosophy. But if she F's up, back to square one. Monkey Butt with the $4.99. Thankful for this channel and its dose of reality. Millennial here that grew up indoctrinated by MS. Well, Monkey, you got one thing wrong. It's MSDNC. Let's keep it square. And by a K-12 public school in the Deep South. I can only imagine how that was. Thank you very much for your support and for being here with us this evening. Duly noted 2427 with the $2. Is Jen Perlman running for Wasserman Schultz's seat? No. Liberty Social Democrat with the $4.99. Pete, I love how you said small business owner, which is humble. Unlike the elite and overused term entrepreneur, small business needs to be cool again. I believe that small business still makes up like 3/4 of the jobs in the United States. It's not as high as it once was, for sure, for obvious reasons. But one of the things I love about small town America is the mom and pop shops. The quality, the care, the consideration. And capitalism in so many respects has destroyed it. And that was a point of contention that I think needs to be addressed, that we didn't really get into deeply enough with John, but will hopefully at some point. Nawal Najir with the $9.99. Israel and the Zionists are behind everything. Drop site news is outstanding journalism. Can't say enough good about Ryan Grimm. He is a true journalist, just like Max Blumenthal in every sense of the word. Gessen82 again with the $5. Mexico is getting many Americans going there for healthcare tourism. You can thank Scheinbaum for that one. Somebody who's an anti-Zionist, by the way, Jewish woman. It's obviously a better system. Let's copy that system and go from there. Hey, anything's better than this shithole that we're dealing with. Gessen again with the $5. Subsidized food, not bombs for Gaza. Government do something for people, Dad. Yes, that would be nice. But as I said, even though there wasn't going to be too much common ground with a successful capitalist, I think it is very important that we understand where their mindset is coming from and try to find common ground where we can. And with the $2, why is subsidized food taboo? Because unfortunately, for a lot of capitalists, nothing is off limits. Everything has a profit motive. Now, I don't agree with that, but a number of them do. Deep Green VO with the $10. This meeting made my antennas go off. What was discussed behind closed doors? Also, the love fest after being at each other's throats a month ago. Zohran raises questions. Yes, I agree that Zohran's pattern will raise questions, but here's the thing. Zohran's responsibility is to the citizens of New York City. And if he convinces Trump to back him on at least one, if not multiple policy positions that he's pushing forward, he's got to do what he's got to do. I respect what he's trying to do. At least that's what I'm observing. I could be wrong. We could all be wrong. But that's my take. That's where I think things are at. Guessing with the $5, do Reagan, please, Pete. I hate him most. I hate Reagan. His policies were catastrophic. Well, believe me, I didn't do the worst policies. I tried my best to make America great again, and I don't think I succeeded in that. In fact, I made America rich for very few people. Reagan certainly did not do this country much good, but there were some things that he did good too. Overall, he was not successful. And overall, long term, he set the precedent, the worst precedents for this country to completely unfold. Shaitan Dadan with the $4.99. Peter, I sat through 50 minutes of free market extremism because I love you. Please never put me through that again. I found the most sensible, communicative person that I could talk to. Chris Garrett, always a pleasure. Thank you for being here for almost 2 years. We all need knowledge to confirm our perspectives. Couldn't have said it better. Job 49 with the $5. Baldwin does not wave, and has mentioned Max several times. Love the channel. We appreciate you, my friend. In many circumstances, as we know, this country has been trying to figure out what has been causing our angst, what has been causing our problems, and is there something much deeper beneath the surface? I've said before, and I will say it again. Charlie Kirk was never somebody that I supported. I always said I respected his grift because he was as good at it as anybody I've ever seen. But it came with a price. Now, ultimately, it came with the price of his life. But he decided that he was willing to risk assassination to no longer be party and an accomplice to Israel's genocide. Now, for those of you who know that I have been paying close attention to this issue and whether or not Erika Kirk had something to do with her own husband's demise, I don't know for sure. Do I think that she is connected to a much bigger web regarding the state of Israel and what Turning Point USA ultimately was in reality? Yes, I do. And the only person who seems to be fighting on the front lines to make sure that this case doesn't die is Candace Owens.
Mommy Sleuth, who was locked into this investigation, discovered something that me and my team had missed. I consider her, obviously, and all of you to be my decentralized intelligence agents. Anyway, she sent me a rather urgent email, and I'm obviously protecting her identity for reasons that are clear. But I want you to know that this discovery is due entirely to her. She is the person that, in this regard, went max for Charlie when I missed something. Her email stated, in effect, that I was only partially right about the plane tracking Charlie, that she had done an additional 15 hours of research and was able to discern that the person the planes were actually tracking for years was Erika.
Now, for those of you who are not familiar with what this is all about, and this is very important, and I discovered this on the day of the assassination, there was a plane that took off, I believe, from a private airport in Ogden. And no one could trace where that plane had come from, how long it was there, how it was able to get out of there. And on top of everything else, this plane left that airport when all of the state of Utah, or at least in the general vicinity of Salt Lake City, was on lockdown. No planes were allowed to take off. And yet somehow this plane did. So how does Erika Kirk factor into this? apparently it's pretty deep.
Not Charlie, but Erika was the one being tracked by these planes. And indeed, it turns out that she was correct. She discovered that between 2022 and September of 2025, both of those aircrafts, SU-BTT, the yellow plane, and SU-BND, the blue plane, showed 68 overlaps with Erika's documented locations, okay? 68 overlaps. I have since been able to add now 73 times that this overlapped, okay? And 29 of those instances also happened to include Charlie. Charlie was also present. And that's what I was stumbling upon when I was looking into this. I was like, why is this plane where Charlie is? The flights were majority clustered within 5 states, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Delaware, and Utah. And it's a pattern that she believes is statistically not random. I'm telling you this information has been completely verified. I am showing you this on a spreadsheet now. These are all the instances in which this plane, 68 instances that this plane crossed with Erika. And I'm also going to say this includes overseas as well, okay? So my instant question becomes, why didn't Turning Point acknowledge that this plane was familiar to them? When I was taking all of these figurative online bullets, someone could have easily said something, right? That's kind of a repeat thing in this investigation. Josh Hammer lies, I get attacked, Turning Point just stays silent. They know he's lying, but they allow the lie to flow. Alex Clark lies, I get attacked, I'm telling the truth. Turning Point knows it, but they kind of allow this like Catholic thing, lie to flow. And the influencers are allowed to lie. Nobody at Turning Point ever just steps to clarify that I'm onto something or I'm telling the truth about something. And when it comes to these Egyptian flights, the math on this is indisputable. There is less than a 0.000000001% probability, okay, under random distribution models that these Egyptian planes coincidentally landed around Erika at these times.
So what does that mean? As I said, do I think that Erika had something to do with Charlie's demise on Israel's behalf? I don't know. But as I've pointed out from the very beginning, there is something very suspicious about her actions. They do not add up. They don't make any sense. And her interview with Jesse Waters could not have gone worse for her credibility. And so Candace is on the case, if you will. And we're going to get into the fact that she has credible evidence that in conjunction with Israel, that France is seeking her assassination. As I said, the reason I believe so much of this is all coming together the way that it is because there are too many people waking up to the reality of what the Zio state really is, how it is an extension of us in the worst way. And it is creating a narrative that they can't shut down. They're trying. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that they get another one, that they get Candace, for example. Israel will not hesitate to completely destroy themselves before they come to the realization that their state is a failed experiment and that it's going to fall. No matter what plans Jared Kushner has for the Riviera and Donald's real estate empire. No, this is reality. And it gets even more interesting.
Like I said, this plane was not just with her in America. It was also tracking her overseas as well. I flagged this because I was alarmed because I thought it was tracking Charlie. And I am telling you that this plane, in addition to Charlie, and primarily actually was tracking Erika. Now, let's get to the day of the assassination. On the day of Charlie's assassination, we know the yellow plane took off in the morning, but the blue plane did not take off in the morning. The blue plane, SUBND, did, however, power on. And I want to be very clear as to what I mean when I say that this plane was on. I am saying that it was transponding, okay? It's transponding at the FBO at Duncan Aviation, a private terminal. So at the very least, they powered up the electronics. At most, they fully powered it on and the engine was running. What we know for certain is that it did not move from the FBO. Did not move. It was just on and transponding. And I want you to recognize, I'm going to make it clear for you what are the times that they were transponding. It's 2 times, and I'm going to tell you those times, but first I'm going to have Mark pull this up and he can tell us what it is that we're looking at here and how we were able to find this information about the jet that was just sitting at the FBO.
Yeah, so it looks like, based on this information that I found, and I had to figure out how to use this website because my mother didn't take enough Tylenol when she was pregnant with me, so I can't get too detailed on it. But essentially, all the flight radar websites only show when the plane is actually in the air. But if the plane is on the ground and transmitting, that data from the ADS-B transponder still goes out. So this website, ADS-B Exchange, takes that raw data. And so I was able to find it on September 10th. If you look on the very left of the frame, it shows September 10th. And it looks like there's just one data point. But what I did is I zoomed in, and the plane's actually not moving. It's just GPS is a little bit inaccurate when you're this close, but you're able to see all these different times here. And that is the UTC time zone, also known as Zulu time. So subtract 7 hours from that to get Utah time. And so I tracked all of these down, and I was able to find that the plane was transponding from 9:05 a.m. until 10:34 a.m. Then it was off. And then at 12:40 p.m., it came back on and turned off again at 1:29 p.m.
Okay, I'm going to repeat that so that everybody understands. We were able to discern from this data as follows. On September 10th, on the day of Charlie's assassination, this plane first transponded from 9:05 a.m. plus 36 seconds until it was turned off at 10:34 a.m. and 5 seconds. Then the plane turned back on, the transponder was turned back on just 17 minutes after Charlie was shot at 12:40 p.m. and 53 seconds, and it stayed on until 1:29 p.m. and 40 seconds. So what was the blue plane doing sitting on the tarmac?
The most logical explanation is that that plane was there to pick up the assassins. And that's it. I mean, do I have proof that that's what actually happened? No. But you know what? There is a hell of a lot of circumstantial evidence that says otherwise. And whoever it was, and it's not the Egyptians, understand how clandestine operations work, ladies and gentlemen. But in reality, something happened that day that was pre-planned. Where did it start? The most logical explanation is that meeting in the Hamptons was a warning. Get your mind right, or you're going to be eliminated. Now, did they use those exact words with Charlie? I don't know. But Charlie, as Candace has shown in some of their final correspondence, suggested that he could be a dead man. And I wonder if he shared that with anybody else. So, who knows? But what Candace is showing, beyond any doubt, is that whatever narrative the FBI or any three-letter agency wants you to believe actually happened on September 10th at Utah Valley State University, only a fool would believe any of it. This is much closer to the truth than anything else.
We can only imagine what it was doing, okay? We can run a couple of options here. It's possible that they were just running a maintenance check. Duncan Aviation does offer maintenance repairs. It's therefore possible that it just chose to run some maintenance checks at an unfortunate time, okay? Another possibility is that a military jet, particularly one from a foreign country, would likely be equipped with encrypted satellite-based communications capabilities. If you wanted to make an untraceable phone call, as an example, that would be a good place to do so because only the NSA would be able to intercept that call. And it's pretty obvious that the deep state doesn't seem particularly interested in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So that'd be a safe place to communicate on that plane. Like I said, these are our options. What we can do now, however, is we can add this to our list of verifiable Turning Point USA lies because I'm going to count this as a lie by severe omission. By keeping your mouth shut and allowing Candace to take all the figurative bullets as she points out the oddity of a plane that you guys recognized, okay? My point is that these planes were known to Turning Point USA, and we all deserve to know why they were on the ground on that day, what they were doing on the ground on that day, and also why Turning Point chose to stay mum when every influencer under the sun and every publication attacked me for even mentioning the planes, making it seem like I was dumb, I was stupid. Turning Point USA is able to provide answers to these questions. There is more that I know, by the way, but I want to challenge them to respond to this first. Were these Egyptian military planes familiar to Charlie Kirk? It is a simple yes or no question. And answer it carefully, please, Andrew.
And of course, she's talking about Andrew Colvett, who I have always maintained is the most suspicious person of them all involved in this entire racket. Probably had the most to gain, as Jen and I have discussed. And it's obvious now that it would make sense why somebody is suggesting assassination for Candace. You never see Candace in public anymore. She's probably in some, compound of some kind. I mean, she does make a lot of money, so she does have the ability to protect herself. But I don't know, maybe it'll just be like a Hillary Clinton type situation where they'll just say, oh, can't we just drone bomb this person? Remember when Hillary said that about Julian Assange? I do.
Andrew Colvett, spokesperson for Turning Point USA. Because there was something very specific, Andrew, that you told me that happened when you arrived into Provo on the tarmac that day, and it is now playing over and over and over again in my mind, and it isn't adding up.
I mean, guys, I'm just trying to get right on the image, if I can find it. I mean, that guy just looks guilty of something. I know you're not supposed to. I mean, he just really looks like a very evil guy. Am I wrong? I don't think so. There's something very sinister about Mr. Colvett. Period. That's one thing Candace is spot on about for sure.
You were in the hospital, that you were told that there was a credible threat against me and Tucker Carlson. Specifically, you told me that me and Tucker Carlson were on a list and that you were just telling me as a friend that me and Tucker should lay low. And after you told me that, I ended our phone call and I immediately called Tucker Carlson. And I said, hey, terrified, like obviously crying all day, and telling him that he and I have to lay low because there's a credible threat. And it is now really living inside me that you did not tell me who that threat was from. I assumed the feds told you, but I asked you the question, why wouldn't the feds call me directly if there was a threat against my life? No such call has come in. How is that possible? How could someone have told you that there was a credible threat and that me and Tucker Carlson should lay low, and yet me and Tucker have since not been notified by any federal agency about those credible threats?
Because Andrew Colvett is in on whatever this is. Allegedly. Lord knows if our channel got big enough and Turning Point USA heard my statement, they would probably threaten me too. Allegedly. But I'm confident in my allegation that Andrew Colvett is a sinister individual among many, but one in particular who held a substantial level of power. And for those who don't know, the Turning Point USA annual conference is taking place in the Phoenix, Arizona area in a couple of weeks. And it really is a who's who of conservative ink that's showing up at this event to speak. I'll tell you who's not going to be there. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Nick Fuentes. They will not be there. But a hell of a lot of grifters will, like Benny Johnson and Jack Posobiec, among others. I contemplate whether I should have the guile to actually get a press pass and fly out there for the event. Thinking about it. I know you guys would probably say, maybe, maybe not sure. Thinking about it, but I don't know. There's something really, really wrong here with what's going on. Officer Tatum actually will be there, Miss Huey. He is on the list. Megyn Kelly, a lot of them, yes. Officer Tatum, that's good. All right, we'll finish this out. We'll finish out the segment. Got one more to do.
Who do those threats come from? Because I got to tell you, there are a lot of people making videos about me and Tucker Carlson, and none of them are Egyptians, okay? In fact, it's the Israelis. It is Israel that seems deeply upset with me and Tucker Carlson. They are not letting it go. They are making threats on every stage, okay? People that are tied to Israel are making threats against me and Tucker Carlson, demanding that we be canceled. So who specifically told you in the hospital room that there was a credible threat against my life? I'm going to need that information, okay? I want to know that now because the stakes seem pretty high. And I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, I would say that if there is credible threats against Candace's life, that she would definitely want to know for sure. And yes, to the chat, Tucker Carlson has been invited as the keynote speaker for the Turning Point USA conference. That doesn't mean that he's not ultimately going to get removed, because Tucker is not playing, and neither is Candace. We have one more short clip to show you regarding this story.
Erika Kirk assumed the role of CEO of Turning Point USA on September 18th, 2025, 8 days after Charlie Kirk was murdered. She has been the CEO for almost 2 months. She needs to answer these questions. If someone has lied on the 990 form, people go to jail for that. I want some explanation of why Turning Point USA sent $8.6 million to their shell company and then did not file financial statements. And Erika, I don't know who does the accounting at Turning Point, but if they have not been telling you about any of this, you need to fire your accountants immediately.
I think all valid points. And again, just to modify, it is possible that when they used that outside auditor, that they showed them all of the documentation and then they gave them a clean bill of health. And then for whatever reason, Turning Point decided not to file. It's possible. Okay. Like I said, probably a low probability, but it is plausible that they did that. But it is just a fact that they missed the filing extension deadline. So what's going on here? Where did the 8.5 million go? And what's also compelling about this video, which we didn't show, is that he clarifies that Turning Point USA actually decreased their staff, the 501c3 arm, 33%, by 33%. So there was a 33% staff reduction. And yet the cost of salaries somehow went up. And to him, that looks suspicious. And I agree, that looks suspicious, right? And this, of course, is the kind of pressure that needs to be put on them. Yes, I said it was a very bad idea right off the bat for Erika, who's grieving her husband, to then instantly become a chairman and a CEO, because these are valid questions now that people are asking. And a chairman and a CEO is going to have to respond to those questions. You have to answer these questions when people are asking about money, especially given the fact that so many people, I mean, they cleared over $70 million.
$70 million cleared, not brought in, cleared $70 million. That's incredible. That's one hell of a grift. They say that the money's on the right, not on the left. But this is a completely different operation. This is an operation funded by the billionaire Zionist class. And when Charlie decided that he was taking Turning Point USA in a different direction, they said, no, you're not. And now, with the people that are taking the reins, including his widow, it's back to business as usual, with a nice increase in the salary, mind you. So yes, everyone should be very suspicious and continue to ask questions, because it is obvious to anyone with an objective eye that there is more than what meets the eye regarding what happened to Charlie Kirk. And I have no doubt that it is a sinister move that had to be made for, again, it's all about money and power. Everything, whether it is Israel or our system in general, it's all about money and power. That is what it has always been. And so long as it exists in its current form, that's what it will continue to be. And Candace, to her credit, I don't know what got over her. Probably a legitimate death threat was what changed everything for her. Probably the same for Tucker. Who knows with Fuentes? We'll see. But as I said, credit where it's due. We'll finish it out.
In the first couple of weeks after Charlie was assassinated. Okay, that's a lot of well-meaning people that are giving money to this organization who are now learning how this organization functions by routing the bulk of their money, or to a lot of their money rather, not the bulk of it, into their endowment fund, right? That is not okay. We deserve answers to the questions that we are asking, and we're going to keep asking them.
And hopefully we get them. Candace has been doing a great job. And I'm sure a lot of it has to do with her friend. Charlie was her friend. We can think what we want regarding their political positions, their moves, etc. But remember, Charlie Kirk was groomed from the time he was a teenager. Somebody saw something in him and they wanted to use him to further their agenda. A very sinister agenda, I might add. And perhaps over time, he decided, probably little by little, that he was going to make a shift. But ultimately, whatever was going on in Gaza eventually overwhelmed him, and he couldn't live with himself. That does happen to some people, even people that initially are cracking jokes about Palestinians, as Charlie once did. But all signs point to a person who had a great awakening, and he just decided, I'm going to take my chances. Well, he took them, and then he ended up dead. So I say this because it brings our conversation tonight full circle. Now, I have been telling people forever that the only way we're getting out of this is not through the two-party system. And yes, elections matter, but elections will not solve the problem that we're facing right now. The fracturing and the disintegration of our empire. It's obvious. And so I'm not lionizing him, Zay, but I am keeping it 100%. We cannot deny how impactful he was, how many people followed him. And now many people are asking questions as to how we get out of this. So I turn my attention to Nick Fuentes, because he is going through what is known as the Streisand effect. Only it's not what people are thinking. He is perceived as a money train. And people want to talk about him like Ezra Klein, as we highlighted recently. And all the while I'm thinking, I have a lot of disagreements with him. Whether it's the language, whether it's what I perceive to be an anti-woman attitude, which I think is a personal hang-up on his part. But I do believe that Nick is a lot smarter than people give him credit for. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. And he put out a statement, I believe last night or the night before, regarding the coming together of the populist left and the populist right. He said this. Here we go.
Why I said the other night, why don't we have populist Republicans and populist Democrats that just solve problems?
Well, let's start right with, it doesn't have to be Republicans and Democrats. We don't need that. Forget Republicans, Democrats, but populists, depending on where you fall. That I agree with.
Just solve problems for Americans. And by the way, I am willing to compromise with the left, 100%. I'll work with anybody. I saw the track AIPAC people. It's some progressive woman and some progressive gay guy.
Who cares if he's gay? Who cares? And the woman in question is Corey Archibald, who a friend in the chat knows pretty well. And I know pretty well. I'm not here to take credit, but let's just say that it's kind of like a Forrest Gump situation, being in the middle of a lot of these interesting circumstances. So again, it's like saying, oh, but he's black. Oh, but he's Indian. Who cares? Doesn't mean anything. Just as Sonny said, unite. We are all Americans. America first, right? Well, you're going to have to forget the fact that somebody is different.
Work with them on shutting down AIPAC in a second, in a heartbeat. Same goes for Anna Kaspari and Cenk Uygur. They were in favor of democratic populism. They want to deliver health care. They want to deliver education. I would work with them in a second. In a second. A Zohran Mamdani all day. That's why I said we need to rethink and realign our politics based on what actually matters.
We know what actually matters. We have to break the stranglehold that is the Zio state over our country. Now, again, I know where Jen stands on this, but I still maintain that I don't care what you think right now. I'm telling you how it is. The people do not want to have this attachment to Israel. The powers that be want it, as they are them and as they are them and them are they. Sort of. You get my point. To the American people, it is an attachment that they want to sever. They don't want this relationship. Andrew, easy. I thank you. I can handle this. Lee Argent got it right. Langley wants this. That's what they want. It's not about what we, the people, want. We, the people, want to end the state of Israel and make it Palestine again.
And what matters to us, we have to drop the wokeness, arguably on both sides. We have to drop the wokeness on the left, which is anti-white and obsessed with immigration, basically throwing the borders open. They have to get rid of the tone policing and language policing. And on the right, we can work together with the left. Maybe we have to let go of some of the cruelty and abuse directed at some of the marginalized communities on their side. It's true. There are marginal people. What else would you call a racial minority other than a marginal person?
As I've been saying and will continue to say, he is a lot smarter than people give him credit for. He knows exactly what he's doing. to build his empire. That's what he's doing. And he's very good at it. And he is going to build a lot of bridges, my opinion, to figure out how most effectively we build a coalition that will create the momentum necessary to break the Zio state. That's our mission.
I'm okay with living in a society where we, as long as we close the borders, we can take care of everybody in the country. We can figure out how we can all get along together. As long as there is a consensus agreement that we can put America first. But what I see from the Trump administration and from the Democrats is neither of them are willing or able to actually do anything for people, for the actual people.
And that is by design. The goal is the goal on Capitol Hill is to never get anything done. To never allow one side any balance of power over the other. That's the goal. And never pass policy that will affect capital. Ever. Which is why the system is going to fail. It already is.
And this is the evidence. Chuck Schumer opens the government with no Obamacare subsidies after they funded the Trump government earlier in the year without a fight at all. But now he wants to put forward a bill on anti-Semitism. Really? So which constituents are you working for exactly?
He's working for Israel. And I got to tell you, I know we haven't played it yet. Maybe we'll play it on Monday. There is a clip of Schumer when he was in the New York legislature way back in the day, back when he had hair in the front. This was probably in the early 80s. It has to be the early 80s. You think he's a Zio scumbag now? You should have heard him then. Oh, he was even worse. Probably because he was younger and more coherent and was able to get away with it, especially in New York. But my God, we talk about people that don't actually represent this country. They represent their corporate special interests, and in this case, the interests of a foreign nation. And it's obvious that Chuck Schumer is one of those people. So Nick's right.
You can't condemn the genocide in Gaza on behalf of your many Muslim or progressive constituents or even Jewish constituents that have a problem with it. You can't deliver on Obamacare, but you're obsessed with it's anti-Semitism, white supremacy, that's a grift. That's just a race hustle. You're just a race hustler. That's just a load of crap. You can take your resolution and shove it up your ass. No one cares. And the same is true on the Trump administration. What are they doing? The Trump administration has deported 300,000 illegal immigrants to date. There's nothing massive about that. 10 million came here in 4 years. They deported 300,000 in a year.
Now, I'm going to continue to repeat this point regarding immigration. And I'm a hardliner on immigration, as most of you know. The reason why we have an immigration problem is not because it matters if the Democrats are in office or if the Republicans are in office. It doesn't matter. What matters is the ruling class, of which they are the most anti-American, do not give a shit about anything other than their bottom line. And this is where Jen and I agree 100%. They want illegal immigration or just immigrants from third world countries because if they could get away with making us slaves, they would. The reason the minimum wage doesn't go anywhere, the reason why we don't have tuition-free public college and trade schools is because the multinational corporations that benefit the most from this broken system are the ones that don't want people to have any brains. They just want them to be drones and cogs in the machine. That's it. Why are Amazon and Walmart the biggest companies? They make the most, and it doesn't require the most intelligence. That's the whole point. people in desperate situations. It's one thing to have a temp job and work your way up. They want you working there forever. And that's why the dumbing down of education in this country is so profound. So Nick's right. Again,
the Trump administration extended the corporate tax cut. No tax cut for the middle class, no infrastructure bill, no jobs, nothing. 50,000 jobs down in October. They won't even release the data. But they're subsidizing AI and eradicating regulations for AI and cutting the corporate taxes. And they're giving contracts to little tech, all their Silicon Valley donors. Policing anti-Semitism. And again, from both sides, you're getting a lot of talk. You're getting Stephen Miller LARPing his Goebbels, talking about hippie boomers and, you are nothing. We don't like the third world. And on the left, you've got Chuck Schumer bitching about white supremacy and anti-Semitism. They get nothing done for anybody. Neither the left nor the right wins. The populists on both sides get nothing. The people are not being helped in any way. And yet, the one thing they are able to come together and work on is furnishing Israel with missiles, condemning anti-Semitism, funding Holocaust museums, endless stuff like that.
So when we say we must end the Zio state, this is what we mean. Because this will never stop unless we band together as a United States of America. You think Larry Ellison gives a flying fuck about this country? You think Jeff Bezos does? You think Elon Musk does? He's not even from here. You think Mark Zuckerberg, the Zio kid, does? I wish I had that graphic of Jen's right now. Yeah, we need to be past that. Things are too serious now. We have to come to terms with how we have to evolve in our political discussions. But it is imperative that we break Israel.
So this is where we need to realign the politics. I'm sorry, but I don't see myself as aligned, actually, with these guys on the right that are obsessed with Israel. And I think that a lot of the populists on the left don't see themselves as aligned with the pro-Israel people in the Democratic Party.
That is correct. So as you can see, guys, these are the four horsemen of the oligarch class. Now, or the four musketeers, however, which way you would want to look at them. The only one we're missing, Jen, is Larry Ellison. You got to get one for him. Got to figure that one out. But as you can see, these four men, these four emasculated men, they really are cartoon characters. They're the four most recognizable oligarchs, arguably, in the United States. And guess what? For the most part, they support the Democratic Party. But depending on the situation, they'll support the Republican Party too. Just depends on who's doing the bidding. No borders, no ideology, none of it. Doesn't matter. Correct. Well, the only reason why Peter Thiel is not here, even though Peter Thiel would probably make an excellent emasculated oligarch, he's actually not as rich as you think. These men are 100 billionaires plus. They're part of, there's less than 20 men in the world that have over $100 billion to their name. 4 of them are these men here. And they're very evil fucking people. So that's where we are. And while I think that Fuentes obviously is flawed in a number of ways, I think that he is also somebody who, as I've said before, we could probably break bread with. And why? Because he's not a corporate sponsored commentator. There's always the chance that he's going to say what he says and mean it, because he doesn't have a financial incentive not to mean it. And that, more than anything else, is how we come together. Maybe he is. Maybe he is a Nazi. You know what? There was a time during the war where World War II, where people had to make very conscious decisions about how they were going to survive and thrive. Who do we side with? I don't know. I don't want to have to go down this road, but I also know that our country is failing. And at some point, we have to figure out, how do we save it, if it's worth saving? He might, as Johnny said, he might be controlled opposition. Maybe he is. All I know is that we're not controlled opposition. We're trying our damn best to try to save our country and change it. Revolutionary style, that is. We hope you've enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate you all being here this evening. For the final time, please consider going over to patreon.com/revolutionary change. For as little as $5 a month, you could become a supporter of our small but mighty channel, or you can go over to our PAC. Click the QR code and check out revolutionarypac.org. We're going to drop an ad on Monday. You guys are going to want to check that out. And so we have a handful of more super chats to get to before we get out of here this evening. Gezin82 with the $2. Candace is screaming death threats yesterday. Yeah, I would imagine that Candace is definitely up against it. No two ways about it. But hey, we appreciate her. Gezin with the $2. They want Candace for transphobia of Brigitte Macron. Hey, I don't care. Another stupid story. I really don't understand how that became such a big deal. You know what? It probably became a big deal because of the way the Macrons reacted to it in the first place. Shouldn't have even acknowledged it. But whatever. That's politics. And now Candace, as Jenna said, may have really stepped in it by going after the president of France. Carson Cruz with the $10. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Carson, for your amazing support. Thank you very much. Gezin with the $2 again. Be careful, Pete. Don't test your luck. Well, I feel like I'm testing it all the time, but who knows? Andrew Wilson with the 10. I believe that's Australia? I think so. Correct me if I'm wrong. Why don't you have Nick on and talk common ground? Healthcare, minimum wage, he's open. I would have Fuentes on for a one-on-one, absolutely. If he's interested, if somebody is connected to him and wants to see this conversation happen, I'd talk to Nick. Why not? If I can talk to John Papola for an hour, I can talk to Nick Fuentes. I'll give up immigration if the right deportation. Thank you for the $1.99, Shaitan Dadan. Interesting. And the $4.99, we have to come to terms with the fact that only the Groypers are capable of breaking Israel. They broke Charlie, and he was made an example of. I don't know if I agree with that statement all the way, but I understand what you're saying. The thing that Jen and I agree on when it comes to the populist right versus the left, populist right is armed, and they are getting to a point where they're willing to fight, and perhaps in a revolutionary capacity. Gezin, thank you for being a member for 6 months. Great show. I'd like to think we had a great show tonight. It went a lot longer than even I thought it would go. But you know what? That's what we're here for. to entertain the masses. Jess, I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate you all being here. We try to transform politics into service, which was our mainstay for a long time. But now the reality has come to fruition that we are in a revolutionary period. And we must do what we can in order to help facilitate that. Why? Because our country is falling apart. And if we're going to remain the United States of America, then it calls upon moments like these. Thomas Jefferson spoke about it at length. When the old system's not working, you create a new one. And that's where we are. Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things we ask you to do. We love you all. We appreciate you all. We'll see you Monday, and free Palestine. Good night, guys.